The mahogany conference table stretched like a judge's bench, and Ryan Calloway stood at one end of it, knowing his life was about to detonate. 32 years old, single father, 6 years of flawless performance reviews, none of it mattered anymore. Damian Wolf's polished shoes clicked against marble as he circled Ryan like a shark that had already tasted blood. The entire executive team watched in silence. Ryan's cardboard box sat on the floor beside him, hastily packed 10 minutes earlier by security. His hands didn't shake, but his son's face kept flashing through his mind. 6 years old, waiting at school pickup, unaware his father's entire world was collapsing. Damian smiled. Not the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. The kind that comes right before the knife goes in. If you want to see how a man rebuilds from absolute destruction, how one abandoned property becomes an empire, and how the woman who was supposed to be his competitor becomes something else entirely, stay with me until the end. Drop a like, comment what city you're watching from, and let's see how far this story travels. The morning started ordinary, which should have been Ryan's first warning. He dropped his son Tommy at Lincoln Elementary at 7:43 a.m., same as every weekday for the past 2 years. Tommy had been excited about some science project involving vinegar and baking soda. Ryan made a mental note to pick up supplies after work. The kid had his mother's curiosity, though Ryan tried not to think about that too much. She'd left when Tommy was 18 months old, and Ryan had learned to be both parents, learned to braid hair from YouTube videos and cook mac and cheese 6 different ways so his son wouldn't get bored. The office building looked the same as always, glass and steel reflecting the gray Chicago sky. Ryan badged in at 8:17 a.m. His team was already at their desks. Logistics never slept. The transportation industry moved 24/7, and Ryan had built his reputation on being the guy who could optimize routes nobody else understood, who could see inefficiencies in freight patterns that veteran executives missed. "Morning, boss." That was Marcus, his junior analyst, coffee already half gone. "Did you see the quarterly projections?" Ryan hadn't. He'd been up until midnight helping Tommy with reading homework, then fell asleep reviewing contract proposals on his couch. Single parenting meant sleep was a luxury he couldn't always afford. "Send them over," Ryan said, hanging his jacket on the chair. "Anything urgent?" "Wolf wants you in the executive conference room at 9. Ryan's stomach did something uncomfortable. Damian Wolf was the VP of Strategic Operations, the kind of executive who wore suits that cost more than Ryan's monthly rent. They'd worked together on exactly 3 projects, and each time Wolf had taken credit for Ryan's analysis while making it clear he considered logistics strategists beneath his pay grade. "Did he say what for?" Marcus shrugged. "Just said be there. Sounded important." Ryan spent the next 40 minutes trying to focus on route optimization data, but his mind kept drifting. Important could mean anything. Maybe they were finally moving forward on the northern expansion he'd proposed 8 months ago. Maybe they wanted him to lead the new Chicago-Detroit corridor project. He'd earned it. 6 years of 70-hour weeks, of missing Tommy's soccer games and eating dinner from vending machines. Loyalty meant something, didn't it? At 8:55 a.m., he took the elevator to the 14th floor. The executive level always felt different, quieter. The carpet was thicker. The artwork on the walls actually looked expensive instead of mass-produced. Ryan had only been up here a handful of times, usually to present findings to people who checked their phones while he talked. The conference room door was already open. Ryan walked in and immediately knew something was wrong. Damian Wolf sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled like he was posing for a Fortune 500 cover shoot. Mid-40s, silver starting to thread through perfectly styled dark hair, jaw that looked like it had been designed by committee. Around the table sat 8 other executives, including Jennifer Moss from HR and Thomas Garrett, the company's legal counsel. HR and legal. Never a good combination. "Ryan," Damian's voice was smooth, practiced. "Please, sit." Ryan remained standing. "What's this about?" "I think sitting would be more comfortable for what we need to discuss." "I'm fine standing." Damian's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "As you wish." He opened a folder in front of him, made a show of reviewing the contents, even though Ryan was certain he had every word memorized. "Over the past several weeks, concerning irregularities have come to light regarding your department's operations." Ryan's pulse picked up. "What irregularities?" "Unauthorized access to confidential expansion data. manipulation of route analysis to favor specific contractors, possible kickback arrangements with third-party logistics providers. The words hit like physical blows. Ryan's throat went tight. That's insane. We have documentation. Damien slid a stack of papers across the table. Your digital fingerprints are all over files you had no authorization to access. Email communications that suggest financial arrangements outside company policy. It's quite extensive, actually. Ryan grabbed the papers, scanned them. His login credentials? Yes. Access timestamps that showed him in systems he'd never touched, reviewing files he'd never seen. Emails from his account to contractors he'd never contacted, discussing payment structures that made his skin crawl. This is fabricated, Ryan said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Someone used my credentials. I didn't do any of this. Jennifer from HR spoke up, her tone apologetic but firm. Mr. Calloway, we've conducted a thorough investigation. The evidence is substantial. We understand you may want to contest these findings, and that's your right. But, contest? Ryan's hands crumpled the papers. I'm telling you this is manufactured. Check the IP addresses, the actual computer terminals. I was never at these locations at these times. Half of these timestamps show me accessing files at 3 a.m. You can verify my badge records. I wasn't even in the building. Badge records can be circumvented, Damien interrupted smoothly. VPN access is part of your role. You could be anywhere. Then check my home internet logs. Ryan stopped himself, realized how desperate he sounded. Realized that nothing he said would matter because this wasn't about evidence. This was an execution dressed up as procedure. He looked at Damien, really looked at him, and saw the satisfaction hiding behind professional concern. The slight curve of his mouth, the relaxed posture of someone who'd already won. Why? Ryan asked quietly. Damien raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry? Why are you doing this? What did I do to you? This isn't personal, Ryan. It's simply a matter of corporate integrity. When violations this severe come to light, bullshit. The word came out harder than Ryan intended, and Jennifer flinched. 6 years I've worked here. 6 years of perfect reviews, of projects that saved this company millions. I've never stolen anything, never taken a bribe, never done anything but my job. So tell me what this is really about. Damien's mask slipped just for a second. The smile disappeared. You want honesty? Fine. You're a good analyst, Ryan, maybe even excellent at the technical work, but you lack vision. You lack the strategic sophistication necessary for the direction this company is heading. The Northern expansion proposal you submitted, the one you're so proud of, was naive, simplistic. It completely failed to account for the political complexities involved in multi-state infrastructure development. That proposal would have generated $30 million in new revenue over 3 years. It would have embarrassed us in front of the State Transportation Board. Damien leaned forward. I killed it, buried it, because I couldn't afford to have my department associated with that level of amateur analysis. And when I explained that to you, what did you do? You went around me, started talking to board members directly, making me look like the obstacle to innovation. Ryan's jaw clenched. He had talked to board members. Because his proposal was solid, and Damien had rejected it for political reasons, not strategic ones. So this is revenge. This is house cleaning. Damien picked up a pen, clicked it once. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You'll receive 2 weeks severance, which is more generous than the circumstances warrant. And Ryan? His voice dropped. I want to be very clear about something. The transportation and logistics industry in this region is smaller than you think. Tight-knit, people talk. By end of business today, every major company in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit will know why you were fired. The documentation will be available. No one is going to touch you, not with this hanging over your career. The room felt like it was tilting. Ryan gripped the edge of the table. You're blacklisting me. I'm protecting the industry from someone who's demonstrated serious ethical violations. What companies choose to do with that information is their business. Ryan looked around the table. Jennifer wouldn't meet his eyes. Thomas the lawyer was stone-faced, probably already thinking about how to handle potential litigation. The other executives looked uncomfortable but silent. Nobody was going to help him. Nobody was going to question this. He thought of Tommy, waiting at school. Thought of rent due in 2 weeks. Thought of the job applications he'd have to send out, only to have every HR department in the region see his name and immediately delete them. I have a 6-year-old son, Ryan said, and hated how defeated he sounded. Damien's expression didn't change. Then I suggest you figure out your next steps quickly. Security is waiting outside to collect your badge and escort you to your desk for personal items. You have 15 minutes. Ushag. The walk back to his desk felt endless. 2 security guards flanked him like he was a criminal, though they had the decency to keep a few feet back. The entire floor went quiet as he passed. Marcus stood up, started to say something, but Ryan shook his head. Not now. Couldn't break down now. He grabbed his framed photo of Tommy, first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed smile. His coffee mug that said, "World's okayest dad, a Father's Day gift." A small, succulent plant that had somehow survived his neglect. Everything that mattered fit in a cardboard box that once held printer paper. His work laptop, phone, badge, all surrendered to security. 6 years of projects, contacts, analysis, gone. They'd probably wipe his access before he reached the parking lot. Marcus caught him at the elevator. "Ryan, what the hell happened?" "Wolf happened." Ryan's voice came out flat. Don't get on his bad side, okay? Keep your head down. This is insane. You're the best strategist we have. Had. Past tense. The elevator dinged. "Take care of the team, Marcus." The doors closed on Marcus's shocked face. Ryan drove home in a daze. The apartment was a 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that was almost decent, which was the best he could afford after child support lawyers and daycare costs. Tommy's toys were scattered across the living room. Legos, action figures, the stuffed elephant he'd slept with since he was 2. Ryan set the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and just stood there, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed, a text from Tommy's school. "Pickup is at 3:15 today. Early dismissal for teacher meetings." 2:47 p.m. He had 28 minutes to figure out how to tell his son their lives had just imploded. Ryan pulled out his laptop, his personal one, old and slow. Opened LinkedIn. Stared at his profile. 6 years at Midwest Transportation Solutions, senior logistics strategist. It looked impressive. Solid. The kind of career trajectory that was supposed to lead somewhere. He started typing a message to an old colleague at a competitor company, someone he'd worked with years ago, got 3 sentences in and stopped. What was he going to say? By the time he sent this, Damien's poison would already be spreading. The industry wasn't just tight-knit, it was incestuous. Everyone knew everyone. VPs played golf together, sat on the same boards, attended the same conferences. Ryan deleted the message. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Calloway? This is David Chen from Great Lakes Logistics. I wanted to reach out because we received some concerning information about your departure from Midwest Transportation." Ryan hung up. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and the calls were already starting. He tried 2 more contacts over the next hour. Both conversations went the same way. Initial friendliness that curdled the moment they realized why he was calling. "We'd love to help, but given the circumstances, you understand our position. Maybe in a few years when this blows over." Nobody wanted to touch him. At 3:15, Ryan picked up Tommy from school. His son bounded into the car, backpack bouncing, completely oblivious to the crater in their lives. "Dad, Mr. Peterson said our volcano experiment was the best in the class. Can we do another one at home? Maybe a bigger one?" Ryan forced a smile. "Maybe this weekend, bud. Is something wrong? You look sad." Kids were too perceptive. "Just tired. Long day at work." "You're always tired." Tommy clicked his seatbelt. "When I grow up, I'm going to have a job that doesn't make me tired all the time." That's a good plan. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Ryan sat at his kitchen table and did the math. 2-week severance would cover rent and food for about 6 weeks if he was extremely careful. After that, nothing. No job prospects, no unemployment insurance because he'd been fired for cause, no safety net. He could move. Leave Chicago entirely. Try to start over somewhere his reputation hadn't preceded him. But that meant pulling Tommy out of school, away from the only home he remembered. Meant admitting total defeat. Ryan opened his banking app. $4,847.23 in checking. $11,200 in savings. Money he'd been putting away for Tommy's college fund, adding $50 here, $100 there, whenever possible. He started scrolling through real estate listings, not sure what he was looking for. Cheap apartments in bad neighborhoods, rooms for rent, anything that might buy him time. That's when he saw it. Industrial property, 47 acres, former rail hub facility. Asking price, $180,000. Ryan almost scrolled past. Industrial property he wasn't looking for, but something made him click. The photos were brutal. Crumbling concrete loading docks, rusted rail lines disappearing into overgrown weeds, buildings that looked like they'd been abandoned for a decade, which according to the listing, they had been. The description was half-hearted. Fixer-upper opportunity, zoned for commercial/industrial use, property sold as is. $180,000. Ryan didn't have $180,000. He had barely $16,000 total. He was about to close the tab when he noticed the location. County Road 47, about 40 miles outside Chicago proper. Near absolutely nothing, just some dying small towns and abandoned manufacturing districts. Except, Ryan pulled up another window, started searching for public infrastructure records. Found the State Transportation Department's 10-year development plan. Traced his finger along the proposed routes. The new Northeastern Freight Corridor. Phase 1 scheduled to break ground in 18 months. Phase 2 would include a major interchange hub specifically designed to connect Chicago's rail network with the expanding Great Lakes shipping routes. And according to the preliminary maps, that hub would be built within 8 miles of this property. 8 miles. When the corridor went active, any logistics company servicing that region would need facilities within reasonable distance of the hub. Property values would skyrocket. This abandoned rail facility, currently worthless, would become prime real estate. Ryan sat back, heart pounding. This was insane. He was looking at buying industrial property with money he didn't have, based on a government infrastructure plan that might not get funded, that might get delayed, that might change routes entirely. He had a kid to feed and no job, and this was the definition of desperate stupidity. He looked at the photos again. Really looked. The bones of the facility were solid. He could see it even in the decay. Good road access, existing rail connections that could be restored, power grid infrastructure already in place. Someone had built this to last, had invested real money before whatever economic shift killed it. Ryan pulled out a notepad, started calculating. If he could get a loan using the property as collateral, but no bank would loan to someone who'd just been fired. If he could find investors, but who would invest with someone blacklisted? His pencil stopped moving. His savings. Tommy's college fund. It wasn't enough to buy the property outright, but it might be enough for a down payment if he could convince the seller to carry the note. Owner financing. It was a long shot, but desperate people sometimes made desperate deals. This was crazy. Absolutely insane. Risking his son's entire future on an abandoned property that might never be worth anything. But what was the alternative? Send out 1,000 job applications that would all get rejected? Work retail at minimum wage? Move back in with his father, who'd spent Ryan's entire childhood telling him he'd never amount to anything? Ryan stared at the listing until the numbers blurred. Then he picked up his phone and called the real estate agent. The agent's name was Phil Barker, and he sounded surprised to hear from anyone. The old Morrison Rail Hub? Yeah, it's still available. Been on the market for about 3 years now. You interested in industrial development? Something like that, Ryan said. What's the situation with the seller? Estate sale. Original owner died, family just wants it gone. They've dropped the price twice already. Honestly, they'd probably take any reasonable offer at this point. What about owner financing? Phil was quiet for a moment. That's unusual, but I could ask, what kind of terms are you thinking? Ryan did quick math. $30,000 down, 15-year note at 6% interest. Monthly payments around $1,200. That's aggressive. The estate might want more down. It's what I have. Ryan kept his voice steady. Property's been sitting for 3 years. Every month they don't sell is another month of property taxes and liability. Tell them I'm serious, I can close fast, and $1,200 a month guaranteed is better than letting it rot. Phil sounded skeptical, but agreed to present the offer. Ryan hung up and immediately felt sick. He'd just committed to gambling his son's entire future on a property he'd only seen in photos. If the freight corridor fell through, if the development timeline changed, if any one of 1,000 variables went wrong, he'd have nothing. Worse than nothing, he'd have debt and a worthless property. Tommy called from his bedroom. "Dad, can you check for monsters?" Ryan walked to his son's room, looked under the bed and in the closet like he did every night. "All clear, bud." "Thanks," Tommy yawned. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo." Ryan stood in the doorway after Tommy fell asleep, watching his son's chest rise and fall. 6 years old, completely dependent on a father who just lost everything and was about to risk what little remained. He thought about calling the agent back, canceling the offer. Being reasonable, sensible, safe. Instead, he went back to the kitchen and started researching commercial electrical systems and industrial property renovation. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. Phil called back 3 days later. "I don't know what kind of magic you worked, but the estate accepted. They want to close within 30 days. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. "They said yes?" "They're desperate. Property's been costing them money for years. Your offer was actually higher than what they expected at this point." Phil paused. "You're sure about this? That facility needs a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work." "I'm sure." The closing was scheduled for April 15th. Ryan spent the intervening weeks in a strange, liminal space. No job, no prospects, just waiting for this one massive gamble to either save him or destroy him completely. He told Tommy they were going on an adventure, drove out to the property on a Saturday, packed sandwiches and water bottles like it was a fun field trip instead of Ryan's entire future crystallizing into 47 acres of decay. The reality was worse than the photos. Rusted gates hung at angles. The main loading dock building had holes in the roof. Graffiti covered most surfaces. The rail lines were so overgrown with weeds they were barely visible. Tommy ran around exploring while Ryan stood in the middle of it, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. "This place is cool!" Tommy yelled from inside one of the warehouses. "It's like a fort!" Ryan walked through the main building, his footsteps echoing. Broken windows, water damage, electrical systems that probably hadn't been touched since the 90s. The scale of work needed was overwhelming. But the bones. The bones were good. He could see it, if he squinted. Could see trucks pulling through those gates, the loading docks active again, the warehouses full. Could see the freight corridor opening, logistics companies desperate for facilities in this region, and this property right in the middle of it all. Could see or was hallucinating from stress. Hard to tell the difference. The closing was strange and anticlimactic. Ryan sat in a title company office, signed his name approximately 600 times, and handed over a cashier's check for $30,000, nearly everything he had. In return, he got a deed to 47 acres of rust and weeds and broken dreams. Walking out of that office, Ryan felt like he'd either just saved his life or ended it. No middle ground. That night, Tommy asked, "Are we poor now?" Ryan looked up from the ramen he was cooking. Third night in a row. "What makes you ask that?" "We used to have chicken sometimes, and you keep looking worried." 6 years old and already keeping track. Ryan crouched down to eye level. "Things are tight right now, yeah. I'm working on making them better." "Is that why we bought the broken train place?" "That's exactly why." Tommy thought about this seriously. "Okay, I can help fix it. I'm good at building." "I know you are, bud." Ryan started working on the property the next week. Not because he had a plan. He didn't, not really. Just because sitting still would drive him insane. He borrowed tools from the hardware store's rental section, bought the cheapest materials he could find, and started with the electrical system because nothing else mattered if there was no power. The first time he successfully restored electricity to the main building, standing in the dark at 11 p.m. when the lights suddenly flickered on, Ryan sat down on the concrete floor and almost cried. Progress was brutal. Ryan worked from dawn until Tommy's school pickup, then again after bedtime. His hands developed calluses on top of calluses. He lost 15 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. Sleep became something he did in 4-hour chunks between problem-solving sessions. Money hemorrhaged constantly. Wire, breakers, concrete. Every fix revealed 3 more problems. Ryan's bank account drained from $16,000 to $12,000 to $8,000. He started shopping at dollar stores, buying expired food from discount grocers, cutting corners everywhere that wasn't Tommy. 2 months in, the first potential tenant appeared, a small independent trucker who needed cheap warehouse space. Ryan hadn't even finished basic repairs, but the guy was desperate, and Ryan was more desperate. They negotiated $400 a month for one of the smaller buildings. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof the property could generate income. Ryan used that $400 to fix the roof on the next building. By month 4, he had 3 tenants. Small operations, bootstrap businesses that couldn't afford better. They paid a combined $1,100 monthly, which almost covered the property loan payment. Almost. Ryan started taking on side work, logistics consulting for tiny companies that couldn't afford real strategists. He'd analyze their routes, optimize their shipping schedules, charge whatever they could afford. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $50. Every bit mattered. Tommy adjusted better than Ryan could have hoped. The kid learned to entertain himself while Dad worked, learned that macaroni and hot dogs counted as dinner, learned not to ask for toys or trips or anything that cost money. It broke Ryan's heart a little more each day. My friend Jake went to the zoo, Tommy mentioned once. He said they have penguins. Ryan was rewiring an electrical panel and couldn't look at his son. That sounds cool. Yeah. Long pause. Maybe we can go sometime when you're not busy. Maybe, bud. They never went. There was never time, never money, just work. The property slowly transformed. Not into anything impressive, Ryan wasn't performing miracles, but into something functional. Buildings that didn't leak, loading docks that could handle weight, electrical systems that didn't blow fuses every 3 days. Month 7 brought a breakthrough. A mid-sized logistics company called asking about warehouse space for overflow inventory. They needed something fast, something cheap, and didn't care that Ryan's facility looked like it had survived a war. The contract was $2,500 monthly. Ryan renegotiated his property loan payment, got the bank to extend the term to 20 years, dropped the monthly from $1,200 to $900. With the new tenant income, he was finally cash flow positive. Barely, but positive. He celebrated by buying Tommy actual chicken for dinner and taking Sunday off for the first time in months. They went to a free concert in the park. Tommy ran around with other kids while Ryan sat on a bench and felt something that might have been hope. Year 1 ended with Ryan exhausted, broke, but alive. The property had 8 tenants and generated $5,700 monthly. After loan payments, insurance, maintenance, and utilities, Ryan cleared about $1,400. Combined with his consulting side work, he and Tommy could eat regularly and keep the lights on. It wasn't success. But it wasn't failure either. It was survival. Year 2 started with Ryan hiring his first employee, a part-time maintenance guy named Jerome, who'd been homeless until Ryan offered him room and board in one of the smaller buildings in exchange for work. Jerome was 53, had a bad back, and knew more about industrial repair than Ryan would learn in a lifetime. "This place has potential," Jerome said, surveying the property. "You got vision, at least." "Vision or desperation," Ryan muttered. "Same thing, usually." They worked side by side, fixing, improving, slowly dragging the property toward respectability. More tenants came. Word spread in the small business community that Ryan's rates were fair, and he didn't ask too many questions about credit scores or business plans. The kind of companies that couldn't get space anywhere else found their way to him. By month 15, the property was 70% occupied. Revenue hit $11,000 monthly. Ryan could afford to pay Jerome a real salary, could shop at normal grocery stores, could occasionally buy Tommy something new instead of secondhand. Tommy turned 7. Ryan threw him a birthday party, just a few school friends, pizza, and a cake from the supermarket bakery. But it was something, normal, almost like other families. "Dad," Tommy said while blowing out candles, "this is the best birthday ever." Ryan looked around at the handful of kids eating cheap pizza in their tiny apartment and thought about the life Tommy could have had if Ryan had just kept his mouth shut, had played politics, had stayed in Damian Wolf's good graces. But he also thought about what he was building. Not for himself. He'd never climb back to what he'd lost. But maybe for Tommy. Maybe this property, this gamble, could become something that provided stability, a future. "Make a wish, bud," Ryan said. Tommy squeezed his eyes shut, wished for something he didn't share, and blew out all 7 candles in one breath. Eek. Month 18 changed everything, though Ryan didn't realize it at first. The State Transportation Department published the final route maps for the Northeastern Freight Corridor. The timeline had been moved up, construction starting in 6 months instead of the original estimate. And the central hub location was confirmed, exactly 7.2 miles from Ryan's property. Ryan found out from a local news article, nearly spit out his coffee. He pulled up the official maps, cross-referenced with his property coordinates, and started laughing. Actually laughing, alone in his office at midnight, because the universe was apparently capable of not kicking him sometimes. Every logistics company servicing the new corridor would need facilities within 10 miles of that hub. His property was the only industrial space of this size in that radius. The next closest option was nearly 20 miles away. He'd been right. The gamble had actually been right. Ryan didn't celebrate. Not yet. Government projects had a way of getting delayed, defunded, or rerouted. He'd believe it when he saw actual construction. But he did start preparing. Finished renovating the last 3 buildings, upgraded the electrical capacity, repaved the main access road, not with money he didn't have. He was still terrified of debt. But with every spare dollar the property generated, Jerome noticed. You think something's coming? Maybe. Smart money's on you being smart. Jerome wiped grease off his hands. Whatever happens, you built something here. That counts. Ryan looked around the property. It was still rough, still obviously a renovation job, but it was functional. Solid. The kind of place that could handle serious logistics operations, if needed. Month 21. Ground broke on the freight corridor. Heavy equipment appeared on the horizon. Construction crews, surveying teams, the whole apparatus of major infrastructure development. Ryan's phone started ringing. Not angry calls this time. Interested calls. Companies asking about availability, about capacity, about rates. Ryan played it cool, didn't oversell, quoted fair prices. Let the property speak for itself. The first major contract came from a regional shipping company that needed warehouse space for automotive parts distribution. They toured the facility, examined Jerome's repair work, kicked the tires metaphorically and literally. This'll work, their operations manager said. When can we move in? 2 weeks. We'll take the main building, 20,000 square feet. What's your rate? Ryan had done the math obsessively. Market rate for industrial space this close to major infrastructure was about $8 per square foot annually. He could charge that, should charge that, but something made him hesitate. $6 per square foot, he said. First-year rate. We renegotiate after that based on market. The operations manager blinked. That's significantly below market. I'm aware, but you're taking a chance on a facility that's still establishing itself. Seems fair? They shook on it. $120,000 annual contract, paid monthly. Ryan's hands were shaking when he signed the paperwork. That was June. By September, the property was completely full. 15 tenants, ranging from small independent truckers to regional distribution centers. Revenue hit $47,000 monthly. After all expenses, Ryan was clearing $28,000 monthly profit. More than he'd ever made in his corporate job. More than he'd ever imagined making. He paid off the property loan early. 15 years condensed into 23 months through a combination of aggressive payments and pure terror of debt. The day he made that final payment, Ryan took Tommy to the zoo, the one with penguins. Finally, Tommy said, running from exhibit to exhibit. I've been waiting forever. Ryan watched his son watch penguins dive and thought about Damian Wolf. Wondered if the man who'd tried to destroy him even remembered his name. Wondered if he knew that the strategist he'd blacklisted was now running one of the fastest-growing logistics facilities in the region. Probably not. People like Damian didn't keep track of the people they crushed. It wasn't personal to them, just business. Ryan's phone buzzed. Marcus, his old colleague from Midwest Transportation. They'd stayed in loose contact, occasional texts, nothing deep. Hey man, did you see the industry news? Wolf's division is expanding into the Northeastern Corridor. They're looking for facility partners. Thought you'd want a heads up. Ryan stared at the message. Damian Wolf, expanding into his region, looking for facilities. He could ignore it, had every reason to ignore it. The property was full, profitable, successful, without any involvement from the company that had destroyed him. But something darker whispered. Damien had promised Ryan would never work in the industry again, had weaponized his entire network to make sure of it, and now he needed facilities Ryan controlled. Ryan texted back, "Thanks for the heads up, appreciate it." Then he opened his laptop and started researching exactly what Damien's expansion plans looked like. Not because he wanted revenge, at least he didn't think that's what this was, but because knowing your enemies was just good business. And somewhere deep down, in a part of himself Ryan didn't like to examine too closely, he wanted Damien to see what the man he'd tried to destroy had built from nothing. Wanted him to see it and know he'd been wrong. The research on Damien Wolf's expansion plans took Ryan 3 nights of digging through public filings, industry publications, and supplier networks. What he found made his stomach twist in ways he couldn't quite name. Midwest Transportation Solutions wasn't just expanding into the northeastern corridor, they were betting the company on it. Damien had convinced the board to invest $87 million in a logistics network that would service the new freight hub. New trucks, new technology systems, new contracts with major manufacturers. It was aggressive, ambitious, and completely dependent on securing the right facility partnerships. The problem for Damien was simple. There weren't many options. The corridor was still developing, and most industrial property in the region was either residential conversions that couldn't handle heavy freight or agricultural land that would take years to develop. Ryan's facility was one of maybe 3 viable options within reasonable distance of the hub, and it was the best option by a significant margin. Ryan sat back from his laptop, processing this. 2 years ago, Damien had destroyed his career and promised he'd never work in the industry again. Now Damien needed him, needed his property, his infrastructure, his strategically positioned 47 acres that had seemed worthless to everyone except Ryan. The irony tasted like copper. Tommy wandered into the kitchen, dragging his stuffed elephant. "Dad, you're doing that thinking face again." "What thinking face?" "The one where your forehead gets all wrinkly and you forget to blink." Tommy climbed onto the chair next to him. "Are you worried about something?" Ryan closed the laptop. "Just work stuff, bud. Nothing for you to stress about." "Is it about the train place?" "The logistics facility, yeah." Tommy nodded seriously. "Jerome says you're really good at the train place. He says you built it from scratch like Minecraft, but in real life." Ryan smiled despite himself. "Jerome talks too much. He also says a bad man tried to break you, but you didn't stay broken." Tommy swung his legs. "What does that mean?" Ryan's throat tightened. He'd never told Tommy about Damien, about the firing, about any of it. Had tried to shield his son from the uglier parts of their story. But kids absorbed more than you realized, picked up fragments from overheard conversations and late-night phone calls. "It means sometimes people try to hurt you," Ryan said carefully. "And you have to decide if you're going to let that stop you or if you're going to keep going anyway." "Did you keep going?" "I tried to." Tommy thought about this. "Good. Because I like the train place, and Jerome, and our apartment." He paused. "Even if we can't afford a dog yet." "We'll get there, kiddo." After Tommy went to bed, Ryan pulled up his contact list and stared at a name he hadn't touched in 2 years. Susan Park, his former colleague from the Industry Association Board. She'd been one of the few people who'd taken his calls after the firing, who'd said she didn't believe Damien's accusations but couldn't risk her own career by publicly supporting him. He typed out a message. "Hey Susan, long time. Question about the Northeastern Corridor expansion. Hearing Midwest is looking for facility partners. Any truth to that?" Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. "Ryan, holy shit, I heard you bought that old Morrison property. How's that going? And yes, Damien's been making calls all month. Why, you interested?" Ryan typed, deleted, typed again. "Just keeping tabs on the market. Property's doing well. We're at capacity." "That's amazing. Seriously, after everything that happened," she trailed off, then added, "Look, between us, Damien's desperate. His expansion timeline got moved up and he's scrambling. The facility partnerships were supposed to be locked by now, but his first 2 choices fell through. He's running out of options." Ryan felt something cold and satisfied settle in his chest. "Interesting. If he calls you, make him sweat. You've earned it." But Damien didn't call. Not the next day or the day after. Ryan kept waiting for his phone to ring, for some stilted professional outreach from the man who'd destroyed him. It never came. Instead, 2 weeks later, a different call arrived. "Mr. Calloway, This is Victoria Hale. I'm the CEO of Northern Logistics Development. I'd like to schedule a time to visit your facility if you're open to it. Ryan pulled his truck over to the side of the road. I'm sorry, who? Victoria Hale. I'm heading up a transportation infrastructure project for the Northeastern Corridor. Your property came up in our research and I'd like to see it in person. Would tomorrow work? Her voice was professional, efficient, no wasted words. Ryan's mind raced. Northern Logistics Development, he'd heard the name. They were the primary contractor coordinating facility partnerships for the corridor expansion, which meant they were the ones Damien would have to go through. Tomorrow's fine, Ryan said. Morning or afternoon? Morning. 8 a.m. too early? That's perfect. Ryan spent the rest of the day in a controlled panic. He had Jerome do a final walkthrough of every building, checking for anything that might look unprofessional or poorly maintained. He reviewed the facility's operational data, made sure his numbers were clean, rehearsed talking points that didn't sound desperate or overselling. You're nervous, Jerome observed, watching Ryan straighten equipment that didn't need straightening. Big meeting tomorrow. Bigger than the automotive parts people? Maybe. Ryan wiped dust off a loading dock railing. Company that's coordinating the whole corridor expansion. If they like what they see, we could be looking at major contracts. Jerome whistled low. That's serious money. Or serious disappointment, haven't decided which yet. That night, Ryan barely slept. He kept running scenarios, imagining everything that could go wrong. What if the facility wasn't impressive enough? What if his rates were too high or too low and made him look desperate? What if this Victoria Hale took one look at his operation and saw what everyone else saw 2 years ago? A man scrambling to survive, not a serious logistics professional? At 7:45 a.m., Ryan stood in the facility's main office, a renovated section of the largest warehouse that he'd converted into something that almost looked corporate. Jerome had made coffee, which was either going to be terrible or drinkable. No middle ground with Jerome's coffee. A sleek black SUV pulled through the gates at exactly 8 a.m. Victoria Hale stepped out wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly revenue 2 years ago, but she moved like someone who'd spent time in warehouses, not just boardrooms. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, the kind of presence that made you stand up straighter without realizing it. Mr. Calloway? She offered her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. Thanks for making time on short notice. Call me Ryan, and it's no problem. He gestured to the office. Want coffee before we tour? Please. They sat across from each other at Ryan's desk, a beaten-up metal thing he'd salvaged from one of the abandoned buildings. Victoria accepted the coffee Jerome poured, took a sip, and didn't flinch, which meant she'd either had worse or was exceptionally polite. So, she said, setting down the cup, I've reviewed your property records. You acquired this facility 23 months ago, is that correct? 24 as of last week. And you've gone from 0 occupancy to full capacity in that time. Yes, ma'am. She pulled out a tablet, scrolled through something. Your tenant mix is interesting. A lot of small operations, independent contractors, not the typical commercial real estate strategy. Ryan kept his voice even. I wasn't trying to follow a typical strategy. I was trying to build something that worked. Fair enough. She looked up, met his eyes directly. I'm going to be honest with you, Ryan. Your facility is one of 3 we're seriously considering for primary partnership in this region. The other 2 are larger, more established operations with corporate backing. But your location is superior, and your operational efficiency numbers are impressive for a facility this new. So I'd like to see what you've actually built here. Not the paperwork, the reality. Ryan stood. Then let's go look. They started with the main warehouse, the 20,000 square foot building currently leased to the automotive parts distributor. Victoria walked through systematically, checking loading dock configurations, examining electrical systems, asking questions that made it clear she actually understood logistics operations. You did this renovation yourself? She asked, running her hand along a support beam Ryan had reinforced. Most of it. Hired help for specialized work, but yeah, mostly me and my maintenance guy. Jerome? Ryan blinked. How did you? I do my research. She moved to examine the warehouse management system Ryan had cobbled together from open source software and determination. This is custom? Couldn't afford commercial systems, so I built something that worked for our needs. Victoria tapped through the interface, tested a few functions. This is actually better than some commercial options I've seen. More intuitive. They moved through the other buildings, Victoria taking notes, occasionally photographing details. She asked about everything: maintenance schedules, tenant satisfaction, power grid capacity, future expansion possibilities. Ryan answered honestly, didn't try to oversell, let the facility speak for itself. After 2 hours, they ended up back at the main office. Victoria sat down, reviewed her notes, and was quiet for long enough that Ryan's nerves started crawling up his spine. "Okay," she finally said. "I need to understand something. Your background is in logistics strategy, not property management or construction. You had no experience running a facility like this. Yet somehow you've built one of the most efficient mid-size operations I've toured. How?" Ryan considered several diplomatic answers, then went with the truth. "Because I didn't have a choice. This was my last option after getting blacklisted from the industry, so I couldn't afford to fail." Victoria's expression didn't change. "Blacklisted by whom? Does it matter?" "It might." Ryan leaned back in his chair, studied her face. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. This was an assessment, a test of whether he'd be honest or dodge. "Damian Wolf, VP at Midwest Transportation Solutions. We had a professional disagreement. He made sure I couldn't work anywhere in the region." "What kind of disagreement?" "The kind where I challenged his strategy and he manufactured evidence to get me fired." Ryan's voice stayed flat. "I'm assuming you'll verify that. Find the official records showing I was terminated for ethics violations. Those records are fabricated, but I can't prove it, so they might as well be real." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I've met Damian Wolf, worked with him on 2 projects before this one." Ryan's heart sank. "Then you know what kind of person he is." "I know he's brilliant at logistics strategy and terrible at managing people who disagree with him." She closed her tablet. "I also know Midwest Transportation is struggling to find facility partners because Damian burned bridges with his first 2 choices by changing terms after initial agreements. So yes, I'm aware of his patterns." "Does that affect your evaluation of my facility?" "Your facility stands on its own merits, Ryan. Your history with Damian is context, not content." She paused. "But I'm curious about one thing. If I recommend your property as our primary partner for this region, you'll be working directly with Midwest Transportation. With Damian, can you handle that professionally?" Ryan thought about it, really thought about it. The honest answer was he didn't know. 2 years ago, the question would have been whether he could handle it without punching Damian in the face. Now, the anger had cooled into something harder and more complicated. "I can be professional," Ryan said. "Whether Damian can is his problem, not mine." Victoria almost smiled. "That's a fair answer." She stood, offered her hand again. "I'll be in touch within the week. This isn't a final decision, but I want you to know you're a serious contender. You've built something real here." After she left, Jerome appeared from wherever he'd been making himself scarce. "How'd it go?" "I have no idea." Ryan slumped in his chair. "Either really well, or I just tanked it by admitting I got fired for ethics violations." "You told her the truth?" "Yeah." Jerome nodded approvingly. "Good. Woman like that, she'd find out anyway. Better she hears it from you." The week crawled by. Ryan tried to focus on normal operations, on tenant issues and maintenance schedules and paying bills. Tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes or imagine scenarios where Victoria called to say they'd gone with another facility. Tommy noticed his distraction. "Dad, you're being weird again." "How am I being weird?" "You made spaghetti 3 nights in a row and you keep staring at your phone like it's going to explode." "The spaghetti thing was just efficient meal planning." "Uh-huh." Tommy didn't sound convinced. "Are we in trouble?" "No, bud. Just waiting to hear about a work thing." "Is it a good work thing or a bad work thing?" "Don't know yet. Could be really good." Tommy seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to his homework. Ryan tried to follow his son's example and focus on the present instead of spinning out about futures that might never happen. 5 days after Victoria's visit, Ryan's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. He was making Tommy's lunch, almost dropped the sandwich. "Ryan Calloway." "Ryan, it's Victoria Hale. Do you have a few minutes?" His pulse spiked. "Yeah, I have time." "Good. I've completed my evaluation and presented my recommendations to the development board. Your facility ranked highest in operational efficiency, location advantage, and cost effectiveness. We'd like to move forward with you as our primary facility partner for the northeastern sector. Ryan's knees went weak. He sat down hard on a kitchen chair. You're serious? Completely. This would be a 5-year contract with options to extend. Base rate of $380,000 annually, with performance bonuses that could increase that by up to 30%. You'd be providing warehousing, cross-dock services, and freight consolidation for the corridor's primary distribution network. The numbers hit him like physical force. $380,000 base. That was more than his entire property revenue combined. And it was just one contract. What's the timeline? Ryan managed to ask. We'd need to finalize terms within 2 weeks. Begin operations within 60 days. That's aggressive, I know, but the corridor construction is ahead of schedule and we need facilities operational when the hub opens. I can meet that timeline. I thought you might say that. He could hear the smile in Victoria's voice. I'm sending over the preliminary contract documents today. Review them, consult whatever legal or business advisors you need, and let's schedule a follow-up for early next week. Any immediate questions? Ryan's mind was racing too fast to form coherent questions. The other facility partners, am I working with them or independently? Independently, but there will be coordination meetings. You'll be interfacing with the main logistics companies servicing the corridor, including Midwest Transportation. There it was, the complication he'd been waiting for. That won't be a problem, Ryan said, and hoped it was true. After hanging up, he sat in his kitchen while Tommy ate cereal and watched cartoons, trying to process what had just happened. 2 years ago, he'd been unemployable, blacklisted, gambling his last dollars on a property everyone else thought was worthless. Now he was holding a contract offer worth more money than he'd ever imagined making. Dad? Tommy was looking at him. Why are you crying? Ryan touched his face, surprised to find it wet. I'm not crying, bud. Just something in my eye. Both eyes. Really persistent something. Tommy came over, hugged him without asking why. 7 years old and already learning to just be there when someone needed it. Ryan held on to his son and thought about all the nights he'd wondered if they'd be okay. If taking this risk had been worth it. If he was failing as a father by dragging Tommy through 2 years of poverty and uncertainty. Maybe it had been worth it after all. The contract documents arrived that afternoon, 57 pages of legal terminology that made Ryan's head hurt. He spent $800. He didn't really have to hire a lawyer who specialized in commercial real estate to review everything. The lawyer was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Chen, who'd handled property deals for 40 years and didn't mince words. This is a strong contract, she said after 2 days of review. Very fair terms, actually. Northern Logistics has a good reputation for honoring agreements. My only concern is the performance bonus structure. It's dependent on metrics that might be outside your direct control. Like what? Transit times, damage rates, coordination efficiency with other facilities. You can do everything right and still lose bonuses if other parts of the network fail. Ryan nodded. Can we negotiate that? We can try, but honestly, Ryan, this is a good offer. If I were you, I'd push for clearer definitions on the performance metrics. Make sure you're only being evaluated on factors you control. But I wouldn't risk the whole deal trying to change the fundamental structure. They spent another day drafting proposed modifications. Nothing dramatic, just clarifications and protections. Ryan sent them to Victoria with a note explaining the concerns. Her response came back within 3 hours. These are reasonable requests. I'll run them by our legal team, but I don't anticipate issues. Well done protecting your interests. The final contract was signed on a Tuesday afternoon in a conference room that still smelled like fresh paint. Victoria was there, along with Northern Logistics' legal team, and Ryan with Patricia. They spent 2 hours going through final details, initialing changes, signing their names on approximately 40 different pages. When it was done, Victoria shook his hand. Welcome to the Northeastern Corridor Network, Ryan. I'm looking forward to working with you. Same here. As Ryan was packing up, Victoria added quietly, For what it's worth, I'm glad this worked out. You built something impressive from nothing. That deserves to succeed. Thanks. Ryan hesitated, then asked, When do I meet with the other logistics companies? The ones I'll be coordinating with? First coordination meeting is scheduled for next month. You'll get details next week. Will Damien be there? Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. Midwest Transportation is one of the primary operators, so yes, he'll likely be present. Is that going to be a problem? No. Ryan meant it. Whatever anger he'd carried had burned down to something colder and more focused. I just wanted to be prepared. Driving back to the facility, Ryan called Jerome. We got it. The contract's signed. Jerome whooped loud enough that Ryan had to pull the phone away from his ear. I knew it. When do we start? 60 days. Which means we have a lot of work to do. This contract is going to require expanding our capacity, upgrading systems, probably hiring more people. Already making a list. You just tell me what you need. Ryan hung up and drove the rest of the way in silence, watching the familiar route to the property that had become his entire life. The buildings came into view, still rough around the edges, but solid, functional, real. He'd built this. When everyone said he was finished, when his entire industry turned its back, when the only option seemed to be giving up, he'd built this instead. Tommy was waiting at home with a neighbor who watched him after school. Ryan paid her, thanked her, waited until she left before scooping his son into a hug. We did it, bud. The big contract came through. Tommy squeezed him back. Does this mean we can get a dog? Ryan laughed, actual genuine laughter that felt like releasing pressure he'd been holding for 2 years. Yeah, kiddo, I think we can probably manage a dog now. Really? Tommy pulled back, eyes wide. You're not joking? Really? Tommy ran to his room, started making a list of dog names, completely absorbed in this new possibility. Ryan watched him go and thought about futures opening up, about doors that had been closed now swinging wide. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Heard about your contract with Northern Logistics. Impressive turnaround for someone who was supposed to be finished in this industry. We should talk. D.U. Damian Wolf. 2 years of silence and now reaching out because Ryan had something he needed. Ryan deleted the message without responding. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty Ryan had lived with while rebuilding from nothing. The coordination meeting details arrived a week later. First Monday of next month, 9 a.m., at Northern Logistics headquarters downtown. All primary facility partners and logistics operators would be present to discuss network integration, timeline coordination, and operational protocols. Ryan marked it in his calendar and tried not to think too hard about sitting in a room with Damian Wolf after 2 years of silence. Tried not to imagine what he'd say, how he'd react, whether the anger would come flooding back the moment they made eye contact. He focused instead on preparing the facility, hired 3 new staff members to handle the increased volume, upgraded the warehouse management system with help from a software developer Tommy's school's PTA president recommended, expanded the loading dock capacity, and reinforced the electrical grid to handle heavier loads. Jerome worked beside him, both of them putting in 12-hour days to get everything ready. But this time it felt different. Not desperate, purposeful. Building towards something instead of running from failure. 2 weeks before the coordination meeting, Victoria called again. Ryan, quick heads up. Damian Wolf requested a preliminary site visit to your facility. It's not required, but it would be good form to accommodate the request since you'll be working together. Can you handle that? Ryan's jaw tightened. When does he want to come? He suggested this Friday. I can tell him you're booked if you'd prefer. Part of Ryan wanted exactly that. Wanted to make Damian wait. Wanted to inconvenience him the way Ryan had been inconvenienced by losing his career and reputation. But the smarter part, the part that had learned something from 2 years of fighting just to survive, recognized an opportunity. Friday works, Ryan said. 10 a.m. Perfect. I'll let him know. Ryan spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled tension. He told himself this was just another site visit, just another professional meeting. Told himself he could be civil, could be the bigger person, could prove that Damian's attempts to destroy him had ultimately failed. He mostly believed it. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. Ryan got to the facility early, did a final walkthrough, made sure everything looked professional and operational. Jerome picked up on his mood. You're about to see him, aren't you? The guy who fired you. How did you? You've been wound tight all week, and you cleaned the office. You never clean the office. Jerome leaned against a workbench. Want some advice? Not really, but you're going to give it anyway. Don't let him see he got to you. Whatever he says, whatever he does, act like it doesn't matter. That's the thing that'll eat at him most, knowing you moved on while he's still playing the same games. Ryan nodded. That's actually decent advice. I contain multitudes. At 9:58 a.m., a Mercedes sedan pulled through the gates. Ryan watched from the office window as Damien stepped out. Same expensive suit, same calculated movements. 2 years older but otherwise unchanged, like the kind of person who aged on a different timeline than normal people. Ryan met him outside, kept his expression neutral, professional, extended his hand because that's what civilized people did, even when they wanted to do other things entirely. Damien, thanks for making the trip. Damien's handshake was firm, competitive. Ryan, good to see you've landed on your feet. Let's take a look at the facility. They walked through the property, Damien asking questions that sounded professional but carried undertones Ryan recognized. Assessing, calculating, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Ryan answered everything straight, didn't oversell, let the quality of the work speak for itself. After an hour, they ended up back at the office. Damien accepted the coffee Jerome poured, took a sip, and set it down like he was preparing for a negotiation. This is solid work, Ryan. I'll be honest. When I heard you'd bought this property, I thought you were delusional. Figured you'd be bankrupt within a year. A lot of people thought that. But you proved them wrong. Damien's tone shifted, became something that might have passed for conciliatory in someone else. Look, I know our last interaction was unfortunate. Corporate politics, you know how it is. Nothing personal. Ryan felt something hot and sharp spike through his chest. Nothing personal. 2 years of struggling to feed his son, of rebuilding from absolute zero, of nights wondering if he'd made a catastrophic mistake that would ruin Tommy's entire childhood. And it had been nothing personal. Sure, Ryan said, because what else was there to say? Damien leaned forward slightly. The thing is, we're going to be working together now. Midwest Transportation is the primary operator for this corridor, and your facility is perfectly positioned to be our exclusive regional partner. I'm thinking we could structure something beyond the Northern Logistics contract, direct agreements that would be substantially more lucrative for both of us. There it was. The real reason for this visit. Damien needed him, needed his facility, and was trying to secure preferential access before the broader coordination meeting. I'm listening, Ryan said neutrally. Exclusive handling rights for Midwest freight, priority scheduling, enhanced rates. We're talking an additional $500,000 annually on top of your Northern Logistics contract. All you'd need to do is guarantee us first priority on your capacity. It was a good offer, an exceptional offer actually. The kind of money that would transform Ryan's operation from successful to genuinely prosperous. It was also a trap, and Ryan knew it. I'd need to see the terms in writing, Ryan said, and I'd need to verify it doesn't conflict with my existing contracts. Of course. Damien pulled out his phone, typed something. I'll have my people send over a preliminary proposal, but I want to be clear, Ryan. This is a limited time opportunity. Once the coordination meeting happens and other facilities understand the scope of what we're offering, that exclusivity window closes. Pressure, creating artificial urgency. Classic Damien Wolf tactics. Ryan stood. I appreciate you bringing this to me. Send the proposal and I'll review it. Damien stood as well, seemed like he wanted to say something else, then settled on, It's good to see you've moved past what happened. Shows maturity. After he left, Jerome appeared. You okay? Yeah. Ryan sat down, realized his hands were shaking slightly. Yeah, I think I am. What did he want? To lock me into an exclusive contract before anyone else can. Jerome made a disgusted sound. You gonna do it? I'm going to read the proposal, but my guess? It's designed to benefit him more than me, and it'll come with clauses that give him leverage to screw me over later. So what are you going to do? Ryan thought about it. Thought about the man who'd destroyed his career now needing his cooperation. Thought about revenge and justice and the difference between the two. I'm going to be smart, he said finally. Which means not making decisions based on anger or ego. If the proposal is genuinely good for my business, I'll consider it. If it's not, I'll walk away. That's more mature than I'd be. Yeah, well, Ryan pulled up his emails, started reviewing the day's operational reports. I've got a kid to raise and a business to run. Don't have time for petty revenge. But late that night, alone in his apartment after Tommy was asleep, Ryan let himself imagine what it would feel like to say no to Damien's offer. To watch the man who'd promised he'd never work again have to accept that Ryan didn't need him, didn't need his approval or his opportunities. It felt better than it probably should have. Damien's proposal arrived Sunday night at 11:47 p.m., presumably timed so Ryan would see it first thing Monday morning and feel pressured to respond quickly. Ryan opened it at his kitchen table while nursing his third cup of coffee, Tommy asleep in the next room, and read through 23 pages of legal language that boiled down to exactly what he'd suspected. The money was real. $500,000 annually was nothing to dismiss. But buried in Section 7, subsection C, was a clause giving Midwest Transportation the right to adjust capacity allocations based on operational needs with only 72 hours' notice. Translation, Damien could demand Ryan bump other clients to prioritize Midwest freight, essentially controlling Ryan's entire operation while Ryan carried all the risk. Section 12 was worse. A non-compete clause preventing Ryan from entering into similar agreements with any competitor logistics provider for the duration of the contract plus 2 years after termination, which meant if things went south with Damien, and they would eventually, Ryan would be locked out of working with anyone else in the region. It was a good trap. Professional, legal, wrapped in attractive numbers that would make most people overlook the poison underneath. Ryan closed his laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, thinking. Patricia Chen had charged him $800 to review the Northern Logistics contract. He could pay her another few hundred to analyze this proposal, get professional confirmation of what he already knew, or he could save the money and trust his gut. His phone buzzed. A text from Damien. Did you get a chance to review the proposal? Would love to discuss tomorrow if possible. This opportunity won't stay open long. Ryan stared at the message, felt that familiar anger stirring. 2 years ago, Damien had held all the power, had used it to crush Ryan without hesitation. Now the dynamic had shifted just enough that Damien needed something from him, and the man couldn't even pretend to be patient about it. He typed back, Received. Will review with my attorney and get back to you by end of week. The response came immediately. End of week might be too late. These terms are time sensitive. Ryan turned off his phone without answering. Monday morning brought the kind of cold rain that made the facility's gravel lot turn into a muddy mess. Ryan spent 2 hours helping Jerome redirect drainage before the first trucks arrived, both of them soaked and cursing the weather by the time they got the water flowing properly. Your fancy coordination meeting is today, right? Jerome asked, wringing out his shirt. Ryan had almost forgotten. Yeah, 2 hours. You gonna tell that wolf guy to shove his proposal? Probably not in those exact words. But you're gonna say no. Ryan grabbed a towel from the office, dried his face. I haven't decided yet. Yes, you have. You decided the second you read it. You're just being polite about the timing. Jerome was right, but Ryan didn't want to admit it. Saying no to $500,000 felt reckless, even when the strings attached would strangle him eventually. He changed into the spare clothes he kept at the office, khakis and a button-down that were presentable enough for a professional meeting, and drove downtown to Northern Logistics headquarters. The building was new construction, all glass and steel, and the kind of modern architecture that looked expensive because it was. Ryan felt out of place walking through the lobby in his off-the-rack clothes, carrying a worn leather portfolio Jerome had found at a thrift store. The coordination meeting was on the 14th floor. Ryan took the elevator up, walked into a conference room that seated 20 people around a table made from a single piece of reclaimed wood that probably cost more than Ryan's truck. Victoria was already there, talking with 2 other executives Ryan didn't recognize. She looked up when he entered, gave him a professional nod. Ryan, glad you could make it. Coffee and pastries are on the side table. Ryan poured himself coffee he didn't need and found a seat halfway down the table. Other people filtered in. Facility managers, operations directors, logistics coordinators. Everyone looked polished and competent and like they belonged in rooms like this. Damien arrived last, exactly on time, flanked by 2 younger executives who carried themselves like they'd learned everything from watching him. He scanned the room, made eye contact with Ryan for half a second, and took a seat at the opposite end of the table. Victoria called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. This is our first coordination meeting for the Northeastern Corridor expansion, and we have a lot of ground to cover. I want to start with introductions, then we'll move into operational timelines and integration protocols. They went around the table, names and titles Ryan immediately forgot, companies representing millions in freight volume, people who'd been in this industry longer than Ryan had been alive. When it came to him, he kept it simple. Ryan Calloway, I run the Morrison facility off County Road 47. One of the other facility managers, a heavy-set guy in his 50s named Ken something, spoke up. Morrison? That old rail hub that's been abandoned for what, 10 years? 12, Ryan said. It's operational now. How much capacity are we talking? Currently 140,000 square feet across 6 buildings, expanding to 200,000 by end of quarter. Ken looked skeptical but didn't push it. Victoria moved the meeting forward, pulling up logistics maps on the screen at the front of the room. She walked through the corridor development timeline, key infrastructure milestones, projected freight volumes. Ryan took notes, asked a few questions when things weren't clear, and tried not to notice Damien watching him from across the table. The meeting covered technical details, docking protocols, freight classification systems, digital integration requirements, the kind of operational minutia that made Ryan's brain light up the way it used to in his corporate job. 2 hours in, Victoria opened the floor for facility partnership discussions. We have 3 primary facility partners for the northeastern sector. I'd like each to present their operational capabilities so we can coordinate effectively. The first presentation was from a corporate facility in Milwaukee. Massive operation, state-of-the-art, everything, impressive and impersonal. The second was from a private facility closer to the hub, smaller but well-established. Then it was Ryan's turn. He stood, pulled up the presentation he'd put together at midnight last night on his aging laptop. Nothing fancy, just operational data, capacity projections, location advantages. He kept his delivery straightforward, didn't try to oversell. The Morrison facility's primary advantage is location, Ryan said, highlighting the map. We're 7.2 miles from the central hub, which puts us inside the optimal radius for both rail and truck access. Current capacity is sufficient for Phase 1 operations, with expansion plans that'll support Phase 2 and 3 volume increases. Ken interrupted. What's your damage rate? 0.3% over the last 6 months? Someone whistled low. That was good. Better than industry standard. Ken nodded, slightly less skeptical. Ryan continued through the technical specs, answered questions about his warehouse management system and staffing plans. When he finished, Victoria thanked him and they moved into coordination logistics. That's when Damien finally spoke up. I have a concern about facility redundancy, he said, his tone measured and professional. We're putting significant freight volume through these partners. What happens if one facility goes offline? Do we have contingency protocols? Victoria nodded. That's a valid concern. Each facility will maintain backup capacity agreements with the others. If Morrison goes down, overflow gets distributed to Milwaukee and the central facility. Right. But the Morrison facility is new, unproven at scale. Damien looked directly at Ryan. No offense, but you've been operational for what, 2 years? This corridor is going to be moving $2 billion in freight annually. That's not the place to experiment with untested operations. The room went quiet. Ryan felt every eye shift to him, waiting to see how he'd respond to the challenge. He could have gotten defensive, could have pointed out that his operational efficiency was better than facilities that had been running for decades. Could have mentioned that Damien's own division had failed to secure their preferred partners because of Damien's negotiating style. Instead, Ryan met Damien's gaze and said calmly, "You're right. Scale is different from what I've handled before. That's why I've built in expansion capacity and redundancy systems specifically to handle volume spikes. But if Midwest Transportation has concerns about working with my facility, I'm sure we can route your freight through alternate partners." Damien's expression flickered, just for a second, but Ryan caught it. Surprise, maybe annoyance that Ryan hadn't taken the bait. "I didn't say we wouldn't work with you," Damien said. "I'm raising legitimate operational concerns that need to be addressed." Victoria jumped in. "And they're good concerns. Ryan, can you walk us through your contingency planning?" Ryan spent the next 10 minutes detailing backup systems, overflow protocols, staff redundancy. Boring operational details that nonetheless demonstrated he'd thought through the what-ifs. By the time he finished, Ken was nodding along and even Damien looked grudgingly satisfied. The meeting broke for lunch, catered sandwiches and salads that were better than anything Ryan had eaten in months. He grabbed a plate and found a quiet corner, not quite ready to make small talk with people who probably wondered why a guy running a renovated rail hub was at the same table as corporate operations directors. That was well handled. Ryan looked up. Victoria had materialized next to him, holding a salad she clearly had no intention of eating. What was? Damien's little challenge. He was trying to rattle you, and you didn't give him the satisfaction. She took a bite of lettuce, chewed thoughtfully. For the record, I did my research on what happened between you two. Talked to some people who were at Midwest when you got fired. Ryan's stomach tightened. And? And the official story doesn't quite line up with what people actually remember. Several former colleagues mentioned you'd challenged Damien's expansion proposal, that it got heated, that you were terminated a week later. Victoria set down her fork. I'm not saying I know what really happened, but I know enough to understand why you might not want to sign an exclusive deal with him. He sent you his proposal? He mentioned it, said you were reviewing terms. She looked at him directly. Are you? Ryan considered how to answer. I'm being thorough. That's diplomatic. Want my unsolicited opinion? Not really. Victoria smiled slightly. I'm going to give it anyway. Exclusive deals with single operators are risky for facility managers. You're giving up leverage and flexibility for guaranteed volume. It works when you trust your partner completely. Otherwise, it's just a way to get cornered. Speaking from experience, I've seen enough contracts in this industry to recognize the patterns. Damien's good at logistics strategy, but his partnership deals tend to favor him disproportionately. Just something to consider. After lunch, the meeting shifted to scheduling and timeline coordination. Ryan mostly listened, taking notes on when different freight categories would start flowing, what docking configurations would be needed, how the digital systems would integrate. Around 3 p.m., Victoria wrapped things up. I think we've covered the major points. Next coordination meeting will be in 3 weeks. In the meantime, facility managers should be working on the infrastructure upgrades we discussed. Any final questions? Damien raised his hand. I'd like to schedule individual facility visits for Midwest's operations team. We need detailed assessments before we commit our freight volume. Victoria looked around the table. That's reasonable. Facility managers, please coordinate with Damien's team on scheduling. Anything else? The meeting adjourned. People gathered their things, made small talk, exchanged business cards. Ryan was heading for the door when Damien intercepted him. Ryan, walk with me for a minute? It wasn't really a question. Ryan followed him into the hallway, away from the others. Damien stopped near a window overlooking the city. I wanted to clarify something. What I said in there about your facility being unproven, that wasn't personal. It's a legitimate operational concern. I know. Do you? Damien turned to face him fully. Because I get the sense you're still carrying baggage from what happened at Midwest. And I need to know if that's going to affect our working relationship. Ryan's jaw tightened. You made sure I couldn't work in this industry for 2 years. Destroyed my reputation. Blacklisted me with every company in the region. That's not baggage. That's fact. That's business. Damien's voice stayed calm, almost patronizing. You challenged me in front of the board, undermined my authority. What did you expect me to do? Not fabricate ethics violations to get me fired. I did what was necessary to protect my division's credibility. If you'd handled the situation differently, if you'd come to me privately instead of going around me, I did come to you privately 3 times. You ignored me because the proposal threatened your pet project. Damien's expression hardened. The proposal was naive. It would have embarrassed us. The proposal would have generated $30 million in revenue, and you killed it because you didn't come up with it yourself. They stood there, 2 years of anger finally surfacing in a sterile corporate hallway. Damien broke first, his professional mask sliding back into place. This isn't productive. We need to work together, which means we need to move past this. I'm offering you an exceptional contract that would be extremely beneficial for both of us. The smart play is to take it and let old grudges stay buried. I'll let you know by Friday. Ryan, once. You said the terms were time-sensitive. I'm reviewing them properly. You'll have my answer Friday. Ryan walked away before Damien could respond, made it to the elevator before his hand started shaking. The ride down felt endless. By the time he reached his truck in the parking garage, the adrenaline was wearing off and exhaustion was setting in. His phone rang as he was pulling out. Victoria. Hey, Ryan answered. What's up? Just wanted to check in. You left pretty quickly. Had to get back to the facility. Lots to do before the infrastructure upgrades. Right. She paused. Look, I know I'm technically not supposed to comment on partnership deals between operators and facilities, but I'm going to say this once. Whatever Damien offered you, make sure you're reading the fine print, and maybe get a second opinion from someone who doesn't have a stake in you saying yes. I'm already planning on it. Good. Also, and this is completely off the record, you did well today. The presentation was solid, and you handled Damien's posturing without getting defensive. Some of the people in that room have been doing this for 20 years, and they don't handle pressure that cleanly. Ryan felt something warm settle in his chest. Thanks. That means a lot. I mean it. You've built something real with that facility. Don't let anyone diminish that. After hanging up, Ryan sat in his truck for a few minutes, processing. Victoria's words kept echoing. You've built something real. For 2 years, he'd been so focused on survival, on just making it to the next month, that he hadn't stopped to recognize what he'd actually accomplished. He'd taken a worthless property and turned it into something that impressed seasoned industry professionals. He'd gone from unemployable to being courted by the same people who'd blacklisted him. He'd proven that the version of him Damien had tried to destroy wasn't the real version, just the one Damien needed to believe in to feel better about being threatened. Ryan drove back to the facility, the afternoon sun breaking through the earlier rain. The property looked different somehow, not just functional anymore, but established, real. Jerome was in the main warehouse, working on the expansion prep. How'd it go? Interesting. Lots of technical coordination stuff. Damien tried to undermine me in front of everyone. How'd that work out for him? About as well as most things he tries. Jerome grinned. You getting more confident. I like it. Over the next 3 days, Ryan focused on the facility. The infrastructure upgrades Victoria had mentioned would require significant work, expanding the electrical capacity, adding specialized docking equipment, implementing new digital tracking systems. He got quotes from contractors, compared prices, tried to figure out how to afford everything on his current cash flow. Wednesday afternoon, Victoria called again. Ryan, I have a proposition for you, completely optional, but I wanted to float it before you heard through other channels. I'm listening. Northern Logistics is launching a facility development assistance program. Basically, we provide upfront capital for infrastructure improvements to partner facilities, which gets repaid through adjusted contract terms over the life of the agreement. No interest, just cost recovery. Ryan pulled over again. He was starting to make a habit of important calls while driving. Why would you do that? Because we need our facility partners operating at optimal capacity, and we'd rather help fund upgrades than watch facilities struggle to meet requirements. It's good business for everyone. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one small condition. The upgrades have to be approved through our technical review process to make sure they actually serve corridor needs. But otherwise, it's straightforward. We cover the capital costs. You pay us back at cost over 5 years. Ryan did quick math. The upgrades he needed would run around $150,000. Financing that traditionally would mean bank loans he might not qualify for and interest payments that would eat into his margins. This option gave him the capital without the debt burden. How many facilities are you offering this to? 3 in your sector. You're the only one who actually needs it. The other 2 have corporate backing, but I wanted to make sure you had the same access to resources. Can I think about it? Of course. I'll send over the program details. Take your time. After she hung up, Ryan sat in his truck feeling something uncomfortably close to gratitude. Victoria didn't have to offer this. She could have let him struggle to find financing, could have treated him like a minor player who needed to figure things out independently. Instead, she was actively helping level the playing field. It felt strange, being helped. Ryan had gotten so used to fighting for everything alone that someone offering assistance felt suspicious, even when it clearly wasn't. That night, after Tommy went to bed, Ryan called Patricia Chen. I need you to review 2 contracts for me. One's an exclusive partnership deal, the other's a development assistance program. Can you fit it in this week? For you? Absolutely. Send them over. Ryan emailed both documents, then pulled out Damien's proposal one more time. Read through it slowly, making notes in the margins. The money was still tempting. $500,000 would transform his operation, give him financial security he'd never had. But it would also put him back under Damien's control. Different circumstances, same dynamic. Ryan providing value while Damien held all the leverage. He thought about Tommy, asleep in the next room. Thought about the last 2 years of teaching his son that sometimes you have to take risks, that sometimes you have to bet on yourself even when it's terrifying. Ryan closed the laptop and wrote out a response to Damien, kept it professional, polite, Final. Friday morning, he sent it. Damien, I've reviewed the proposed partnership agreement. After careful consideration and legal consultation, I've decided to decline. The terms don't align with my facility's operational strategy. I'm happy to work with Midwest Transportation through the standard corridor coordination framework, but I won't be entering an exclusive arrangement. Best regards, Ryan. The response came within 10 minutes. This is a mistake. You're turning down guaranteed revenue for some principal that won't pay your bills. Call me when you've reconsidered. Ryan deleted the message and didn't respond. Patricia called that afternoon. Okay, I've reviewed both contracts. The Northern Logistics Development Program is clean, surprisingly clean, actually. No hidden clauses, no problematic terms. It's exactly what it claims to be. The Midwest exclusive deal, on the other hand, is a trap. I wouldn't go that far, but it's heavily weighted in their favor. That capacity allocation clause would give them enormous control over your operations, and the non-compete is brutal. You'd be locked in for years with very limited exit options. I already turned it down. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Good. I know $500,000 is hard to walk away from, but you made the right choice. You've built something independent. Keep it that way. Ryan accepted the Northern Logistics Development Assistance Program on Monday. Victoria personally called to congratulate him and schedule the technical review. I'm glad you're taking advantage of this, she said. We need you operating at full capacity when the corridor opens. When are you planning to visit for the review? Is next week too soon? I'd like to get the process started so you have time to complete upgrades before Phase 1 launch. Next week works. Victoria arrived the following Thursday, this time with a technical team, engineers and logistics specialists who spent 4 hours examining every aspect of the facility. They measured electrical capacity, assessed structural integrity, reviewed the expansion plans Ryan had drawn up with Jerome's help. Ryan walked alongside them, answering questions, explaining his reasoning for different choices. One of the engineers, a woman in her 40s named Sarah, kept nodding approvingly. This is smart design, she said, examining the way Ryan had configured the loading docks. You're maximizing efficiency without overcomplicating the layout. A lot of people try to get too fancy and end up with workflow bottlenecks. I learned that the hard way, Ryan admitted. First configuration I tried was a disaster. Had to rebuild the whole thing. After the assessment, Victoria pulled Ryan aside. My team's impressed. You're approved for the full development assistance amount. We'll have the capital transferred within a week. That was easier than expected. You did the hard part already, building something worth investing in. She glanced around the facility. Can I ask you something off the record? Sure. Why this? Why buy an abandoned property and pour everything into rebuilding it? You had skills, experience. You could have moved to another city, started over somewhere your history with Damien wouldn't follow. Ryan thought about how to answer. I have a son. Pulling him away from the only home he knows, starting over in a strange city where we didn't know anyone. That felt worse than staying and fighting. And maybe I needed to prove something. To myself, to Damien, to everyone who thought I was finished. Did you? Prove it? I think so, or I'm getting close. Victoria smiled. For what it's worth, you've definitely proven it to me. The facility speaks for itself. As she was leaving, Victoria paused at her car. Ryan, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Damien's been pushing hard for us to drop you as a partner. Claims you're unreliable, that your facility can't handle the scale we need. Ryan's stomach dropped. Is it working? No, your operational data contradicts everything he's claiming, but I wanted you to know he's actively trying to undermine you. Be careful. After she left, Ryan stood in the parking lot feeling the weight of it. Damien wasn't going to let this go. Wasn't going to accept that Ryan had succeeded despite everything. The war wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. Jerome found him 20 minutes later, still standing there. You look like someone just told you bad news. Damien's trying to get me removed as a corridor partner. Can he do that? Probably not. But he can make things difficult. So what are you going to do? Ryan looked at the facility, at the buildings he'd restored with his own hands, at the business he'd built from absolute nothing. Thought about Tommy, about the future he was trying to create. I'm going to do my job better than he can undermine it, Ryan said, and I'm going to make damn sure he sees exactly how wrong he was about me. The infrastructure upgrade started the following Monday with a crew of 8 contractors who descended on the facility like a tactical team. Ryan coordinated with Sarah, the engineer from Victoria's assessment team, who'd been assigned to oversee the technical implementation. She was efficient, detail-oriented, and had zero patience for shortcuts. "This electrical panel needs to be completely replaced," she said, examining the main distribution board. "I know you upgraded it yourself, and it's decent work, but for the load we're planning, we need commercial-grade components." Ryan nodded, swallowing his pride. Whatever it takes to meet spec. The work was loud, disruptive, and expensive, even with Northern Logistics covering the capital costs. Ryan's existing tenants complained about the noise, the blocked access routes, the general chaos of having construction happening while they were trying to operate. He spent half his days apologizing and the other half problem-solving how to minimize disruption. Tommy noticed the stress. "Dad, you're drinking a lot of coffee again." "Big project at work, bud." "Is it a good big or a bad big?" Ryan looked at his son, 7 years old, and already learning to read emotional states. "Good big, just complicated." "Complicated good is still good," Tommy said with the certainty of someone who hadn't yet learned how wrong that could be. 2 weeks into the upgrades, Ryan got a call from Ken, the facility manager from Milwaukee, who'd been skeptical at the coordination meeting. "Callaway?" "Ken Patterson. We met at the Northern Logistics meeting." "I remember. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling as a courtesy. Damian Wolf's been reaching out to some of us, asking questions about your facility. Operational capacity, reliability concerns, whether we've heard anything problematic." Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. "What did you tell him?" "That I don't know you well enough to have an opinion, which is true. But I thought you should know he's making calls. Feels like he's building a case for something." "Thanks for the heads up." "No problem. For what it's worth, your presentation at the meeting was solid. Don't let corporate politics mess with good work." Ryan hung up and immediately called Victoria. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. "Ryan, I'm actually in a meeting right now. Damian's calling other facility managers, asking them to provide negative assessments of my operation. Ken Patterson just gave me a heads up." Victoria was quiet for a moment. He heard her excuse herself, then a door closing. "Say that again." Ryan repeated what Ken had told him. When he finished, Victoria's voice had gone cold. "That's completely inappropriate. Facility partnerships are supposed to be evaluated on operational merit, not personal campaigns. I need to make some calls. Don't do anything yet." What's anything in this context? Don't confront Damian directly. Don't send angry emails. Don't give him ammunition to claim you're difficult to work with. "I wasn't planning on it." "Good. Let me handle this through proper channels." But handling it through proper channels took time, and Damian clearly wasn't operating on the same timeline. 3 days later, Ryan received a formal notice from Midwest Transportation's legal department, a quality assurance audit request demanding full access to Ryan's facility operations, financial records, and tenant agreements. Ryan forwarded it to Patricia Chen with a message. "Is this legal?" She called back within the hour. "Technically, yes, if it's within the scope of their partnership due diligence. Practically, it's harassment. They're requesting access to information that goes beyond normal operational review. They want your financial records? That's overreach. Can I refuse? You can push back. Offer to provide operational data relevant to corridor coordination, but decline to share proprietary financial information. Make them justify why they need specifics that don't affect freight handling." Ryan drafted a response with Patricia's help, keeping it professional but firm. He wasn't going to hand Damian ammunition disguised as compliance. The response from Midwest's legal team came back fast and aggressive. Failure to comply with the audit request would be considered a material breach of partnership protocols and could result in Ryan's facility being removed from the corridor network. "They're bluffing," Patricia said when Ryan forwarded her the threat. "They can't remove you unilaterally. Northern Logistics controls facility partnerships, not individual operators." "So I ignore it? You escalate it to Victoria and let Northern Logistics handle their operator. This is exactly the kind of thing that happens when personal grudges infect professional relationships." Ryan called Victoria. She answered immediately this time, and she sounded angry. "I just got copied on Midwest's audit demand. This is completely out of line. I'm calling an emergency meeting with their executive team tomorrow. In the meantime, do not provide them with anything beyond standard operational reports." What if they follow through on the removal threat? They won't. They can't. And if Damien tries to push this through unofficial channels, he's going to find out exactly how much leverage he doesn't have. The emergency meeting happened at Northern Logistics headquarters. Victoria didn't invite Ryan, but she called him afterward from her car, sounding exhausted. That was ugly. Damien showed up with 2 lawyers, and his division president came in aggressive. Claimed your facility represents an unacceptable risk to corridor operations, that you've been uncooperative with legitimate oversight, that your financial instability threatens the entire partnership network. Ryan felt his chest tighten. Financial instability? My facility is cash positive and fully operational. I know, I pointed that out. Repeatedly. Showed them your operational data, your damage rates, your on-time performance. Everything contradicted his claims. How did he respond? Doubled down. Said the data was preliminary, that your facility hasn't been tested at scale, that personal history between you two was irrelevant to his operational concerns. Victoria paused. Then he made a mistake. What kind of mistake? He implied that Northern Logistics was showing favoritism by offering you development assistance, suggested we were backing an inferior facility partner because of, and I quote, misplaced sympathy for a struggling operator. Ryan closed his eyes. How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. I reminded him that development assistance is offered based on merit and need, that your facility ranked highest in our technical assessments, and that his company doesn't get to dictate our partnership criteria. She sighed. He left angry, but he also left without getting what he wanted. Which was? Permission to force you out. He was hoping we'd cave to pressure, agree that removing you was simpler than dealing with his complaints. Instead, I made it very clear that your facility partnership is secure, and any further harassment will be treated as a contractual violation on Midwest's part. Ryan sat down, processing. You went to bat for me. I went to bat for good operations and professional standards. Damien's letting personal issues contaminate business decisions. That's not how this works. After hanging up, Ryan sat in his office for a long time. The facility hummed around him, trucks loading and unloading, forklifts moving freight, the ambient noise of a functioning operation. He'd built this. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but he'd built it, and it worked. And Damien still couldn't accept it. Jerome knocked on the door frame. You okay? You got that look again. What look? The one where you're deciding whether to fight or walk away. Ryan looked at him. I'm not walking away. Good, because I really like this job and I'm too old to start over somewhere else. That weekend, Ryan took Tommy to a minor league baseball game. Not because they could really afford it, but because his son had been patient through months of Ryan being stressed and distracted, and 7-year-olds shouldn't have to shoulder their father's battles. This is awesome, Tommy said, demolishing a hot dog that cost $12 and tasted like cardboard. Can we come back? Maybe. If things go well at work. Things always go well eventually, Tommy said with unearned confidence. You're really good at your job. Ryan felt something crack in his chest. How do you know that? Because you work really hard and you don't give up. That's what Jerome says. Jerome talks too much. He says that too. The game went into extra innings. Tommy fell asleep in the 7th, head on Ryan's shoulder, while Ryan watched bad baseball and thought about the war he was fighting. Damien had resources, connections, institutional power. All Ryan had was a facility that worked and a stubborn refusal to be destroyed twice by the same person. Maybe that would be enough. The second coordination meeting was scheduled for early March. Ryan showed up 15 minutes early with updated operational reports and a determination not to let Damien rattle him. The conference room was already half full. Ken from Milwaukee, the other facility managers, several operations directors. Damien arrived exactly on time, flanked by the same executives as before. He didn't look at Ryan, which somehow felt more aggressive than direct confrontation. Victoria called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Today we're reviewing Phase 1 readiness across all facility partners. We'll go through each operation systematically, address any concerns, and finalize coordination protocols before the corridor opens next month. She started with the Milwaukee facility. Ken presented strong numbers, solid infrastructure, corporate backing that made everything look easy. The central facility went next, equally impressive. Then it was Ryan's turn. He pulled up his presentation, infrastructure upgrades 90% complete, new digital tracking systems integrated, Capacity expanded to 200,000 square feet. Staffing increased to handle volume projections. He walked through the technical details, answered questions about timeline and coordination. "What's your current damage rate?" one of the operations directors asked. 0.27% over the last 90 days. Someone whistled. That was better than Ken's numbers, better than most facilities Ryan had researched. Ken himself looked impressed, despite trying to hide it. Damien waited until Ryan finished before speaking. "These numbers look good on paper, but I have concerns about operational reality. Your facility hasn't been tested at anything close to corridor volume. You're projecting capacity that you've never actually demonstrated." Victoria cut in. "The same could be said for any facility before a major expansion. That's why we have phased rollouts and contingency protocols." "Right, but the other facilities have track records, corporate infrastructure, financial backing that ensures they can handle unexpected costs." Damien looked directly at Ryan for the first time. "What happens if you hit a major mechanical failure? If your electrical system can't handle peak load? If you run into cash flow problems? You're operating on thin margins with no safety net." Ryan kept his voice level. "My facility is debt-free, cash positive, and has reserve capital specifically for operational emergencies. The infrastructure upgrades were engineered to handle 15% above projected peak load, and I maintain backup agreements with both partner facilities for overflow support." Backup agreements you've never actually tested under real conditions. Neither have you. Nobody has. That's the nature of new infrastructure. Damien's jaw tightened. "I'm raising legitimate concerns about operational readiness." "You're raising hypothetical problems that apply equally to every facility in this room," Victoria interrupted. Her voice stayed professional, but there was steel underneath. "Ryan's operational data supports his readiness claims. Unless you have specific evidence of deficiencies, we need to move forward. I have evidence of financial instability. His facility was purchased with minimal capital, renovated on a shoestring budget. That's not the foundation for reliable large-scale operations." Ryan felt the anger rising but pushed it down. "My facility's financial position is documented in the partnership disclosures. Northern Logistics reviewed and approved my capitalization. If you have issues with their assessment criteria, that's between you and them." Ken spoke up unexpectedly. "For what it's worth, I toured Callaway's facility last week. The operation is solid. Better than some corporate facilities I've seen that had 10 times the budget." Damien shot him a look. "You toured his facility?" "After your calls asking about reliability, I figured I should see for myself instead of taking anyone's word. The work is impressive." Ryan hadn't known Ken had visited. Jerome must have handled the tour without mentioning it. He made a mental note to thank both of them later. Victoria moved the meeting forward, cutting off Damien's attempt to respond. They covered coordination protocols, timing schedules, emergency procedures. Every time Damien tried to circle back to questioning Ryan's readiness, Victoria redirected to operational specifics that Ryan could answer with data. By the time the meeting ended, Damien looked frustrated, and everyone else looked ready to be done with the tension. Ryan packed his materials quickly, wanting to escape before another confrontation. Victoria caught him in the hallway. "That was rough. You handled it well." "Didn't feel like it." "Trust me, you did. Damien's used to intimidating people into backing down. You didn't give him that satisfaction." She glanced back toward the conference room. "I need to tell you something. This stays between us for now." Ryan's stomach nodded. "Okay. Northern Logistics is conducting a formal review of Midwest Transportation's conduct. The harassment, the inappropriate audit demands, the attempts to undermine a verified facility partner, it's all documented. If the review finds contractual violations, we have grounds to terminate their operator agreement." Ryan's eyes widened. "You'd kick Damien's company out of the corridor?" "Not the company, just their participation in this specific network. They could still operate in the region, but not as a primary corridor partner. It would be a significant blow to their expansion plans." "Would that even work?" "They're a major player. They're a major player who signed a conduct agreement that explicitly prohibits this kind of interference. If they violated those terms, consequences follow." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm telling you this so you understand. You're not fighting this alone. The system is supposed to protect against exactly this kind of abuse." After she left, Ryan sat in his truck and tried to process what she'd said. The idea that Damien might face actual consequences for his behavior felt surreal. For 2 years, Ryan had assumed powerful people just got away with things because that's how the world worked. Maybe he'd been wrong. The formal review started the following week. Ryan wasn't directly involved, but he provided documentation when requested. Records of Damien's communications, the threatening audit demand, timestamps showing the pattern of interference. Patricia helped him organize everything, making sure it was clear and irrefutable. "This is a strong case," she said, reviewing the compiled evidence. "If Northern Logistics is serious about enforcement, Midwest's going to have a hard time defending this."
What are the odds they're serious? Honestly, higher than I expected. Victoria Hale has a reputation for running clean operations. She doesn't tolerate this kind of behavior. 2 weeks into the review, Ryan got a surprise call from Marcus, his old colleague from Midwest Transportation.
"Ryan, I shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you'd want to know. Damien's losing his mind here. There's a review happening, auditors going through all his communications, and he's blaming everyone but himself." "What's the mood there?" "Tense. A lot of people are quietly saying they're not surprised. Damien's burned enough bridges internally that nobody's rushing to defend him." Marcus lowered his voice. "Between you and me, there's talk the board might force him out regardless of how the Northern Logistics review goes. This whole expansion was his project, and if it falls apart because he couldn't stop going after you..." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. The idea of Damien being fired, of experiencing even a fraction of what Ryan had gone through, should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just felt tired. "I appreciate you calling," Ryan said finally. "Yeah, well, some of us never believed what he said about you. Sorry it took this long to say it out loud." The corridor opened for Phase 1 operations on April 3rd. Ryan stood in his facility at 5 a.m., watching the first trucks roll through his gates carrying freight for the Northeastern network. Jerome stood beside him, coffee in hand, both of them too wired to feel tired. "This is really happening," Jerome said. "Yeah." "You built something, boss." Ryan watched his staff directing trucks to loading docks, the digital tracking system lighting up with incoming shipments, the facility operating exactly as he'd designed it. "We built something." The first week was chaos, the inevitable problems that came with launching new infrastructure at scale. A digital integration glitch caused routing errors. One of the loading docks had a hydraulic failure. A truck driver got lost and ended up at the wrong facility. Ryan and his team worked 18-hour days fixing problems, adapting systems, learning on the fly. But the facility held, the damage rate stayed low, the freight kept moving. By week 2, things started smoothing out. The digital systems stabilized. The staff found their rhythm. Ryan's facility was processing 12,000 cubic feet of freight daily, hitting all their targets. Victoria visited on Friday of week 2, walking through during peak operations. She observed for an hour without saying much, just watching the controlled chaos of a functioning logistics hub. "This is good work," she said finally. "Better than I hoped for, honestly. You're exceeding performance projections. We're still working out kinks. Everyone is. But your damage rate is the lowest in the network, and your on-time processing is the highest. That's not luck. That's good management." That same afternoon, Ryan got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Ryan Calloway." "Mr. Calloway, this is James Fisher, Executive Vice President at Midwest Transportation Solutions. I'm calling to inform you that Damien Wolf is no longer with our company. Effective immediately, I'll be overseeing our corridor operations." Ryan's mind went blank. "I'm sorry. What?" Damien's employment was terminated following an internal review of his conduct. "I want to assure you that Midwest Transportation is committed to professional partnership with all corridor facilities, including yours. Whatever personal conflicts may have existed previously, they're no longer relevant to our business relationship." He was fired? I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of his departure, but I did want to reach out personally to reset our working relationship on proper professional footing. After hanging up, Ryan just sat there. Damien was gone. Actually gone. The man who'd destroyed his career, who'd spent 2 years trying to destroy him again, had finally faced consequences. Ryan called Victoria. "Did you know about Damien? I got notification this morning. Northern Logistics Review concluded he violated multiple conduct provisions. Midwest had to choose between losing their corridor partnership or removing him. They chose him." "How do you feel about it?" Ryan asked. "Relieved, mostly. Damien was talented but toxic. The corridor will run better without that energy. She paused. How do you feel? Ryan thought about it. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. That night, he took Tommy out for actual restaurant dinner, not fast food or home cooking, but a place with tablecloths and waiters and prices that used to make Ryan's hands sweat. Are we celebrating something? Tommy asked, studying the menu seriously. Yeah, bud. We're celebrating making it through. Through what? Just a hard couple of years. Tommy ordered chicken fingers anyway, despite the fancy menu, and Ryan got a steak he could finally afford without anxiety. They ate slowly, talking about school and Tommy's upcoming birthday, and whether they should get a puppy or an older dog from the shelter. Normal conversation. Normal life. The kind of evening Ryan had wondered if they'd ever have again. Walking to the car afterward, Tommy grabbed his hand. Dad, are you happy? The question caught Ryan off guard. Yeah, kiddo, I think I am. Good. You smile more now. I like it when you smile. Ryan squeezed his son's hand, feeling the weight of everything they'd survived together. The firing, the poverty, the desperate gamble on a property everyone thought was worthless. The 2 years of fighting and building and refusing to stay broken. They'd made it through. Not perfectly, not without scars, but they'd made it. And somewhere in the process, Ryan had stopped being the man Damien tried to destroy and become someone else entirely. Someone who'd built something real from nothing. Someone who'd proven that the people everyone writes off sometimes become the ones who build the future. The facility lights were still on when they drove past on the way home, trucks moving through the gates carrying freight for the northeastern corridor. Ryan's facility, his business, his future. Built from rust and determination and the stubborn refusal to let anyone else define what he was capable of. The weeks after Damien's firing should have felt like victory, but mostly they just felt busy. The corridor was fully operational now, freight volume increasing weekly as more manufacturers and distributors connected to the network. Ryan's facility was running at 85% capacity, which meant they were making money but had room to grow. Jerome had hired 2 more maintenance workers, and Ryan had brought on a shift supervisor named Maria, who'd worked logistics for 15 years and knew more about efficient freight handling than Ryan would learn in a lifetime. Tommy turned 8 in late April. Ryan threw him a real party this time, rented a community center room, invited his whole class, bought a cake from an actual bakery instead of the supermarket. 20 kids screaming and playing games while parents made small talk, and Ryan tried not to calculate how much the party was costing per minute. This is the best birthday ever, Tommy announced, covered in frosting and happiness. You said that last year. This year's even better. We have a dog now. They did have a dog, a 3-year-old mixed breed from the shelter named Murphy, who is currently at home probably destroying something. Tommy had picked him out 3 weeks ago, and Ryan hadn't realized how much he'd missed having something else alive in the apartment besides the 2 of them. One of the other parents approached while Tommy was distracted with presents. You're Ryan, right? Tommy's dad? That's me. I'm Sarah Chen's mom. The girls are in the same class. She smiled. Tommy talks about you a lot, says you built a whole train place from nothing. Ryan felt awkward accepting the compliment. It's a logistics facility, but yeah, took a while. That's incredible. My husband and I run a small business, and just keeping it afloat is exhausting. I can't imagine building something from scratch. It was either that or give up entirely. Turns out desperation is decent motivation. She laughed, and Ryan realized he'd made a joke about the worst period of his life without the bitterness that used to come automatically. Maybe he was healing, or maybe enough time had passed that the edges had worn smooth. The following Monday, Victoria called with a proposal Ryan hadn't expected. I'm resigning from Northern Logistics, she said, no preamble. Effective end of quarter. Ryan nearly dropped his coffee. What? Why? Lots of reasons. Burnout, mostly. I've been doing this for 8 years and I'm tired. But I'm calling because I want to talk to you about something before I make it official. I'm listening. I've been watching how you run your operation, the way you problem solve, how you've built systems that actually work, instead of just looking good on paper. You're good at this, Ryan. Better than you probably realize. She paused. I'm thinking about starting a consulting firm. Small operations, helping mid-sized facilities optimize their logistics networks. And I want to know if you'd be interested in partnering on it. Ryan's mind went completely blank. Partnering? You'd keep running your facility. That's your foundation. But you'd also consult on facility development and operations strategy. We'd split the consulting revenue, build something together. I bring the corporate connections and industry reputation. You bring the ground level expertise and proof of concept. Victoria, I barely know what I'm doing half the time. I'm making this up as I go. That's exactly why you're good at it. You solve real problems instead of theoretical ones. You build things that work in practice, not just in PowerPoint presentations. Her voice softened. Look, I know this is coming out of nowhere. Think about it. We can talk details later. After hanging up, Ryan sat in his office trying to process. Victoria Hale wanted to partner with him. The CEO who'd given him a chance when everyone else dismissed him, who'd defended his facility against Damien's attacks, who'd proven that professional integrity actually meant something. She wanted to build a business together. Jerome knocked on the door. You look confused. Victoria wants to start a consulting company with me. The CEO, lady? That's huge. I don't know anything about consulting. You rebuilt this entire facility from junk. You figured out logistics systems that corporate places pay millions for. You know plenty. Jerome leaned against the doorframe. Question is, do you want to do it? Ryan thought about it. The facility was stable now, running well enough that he didn't need to be physically present 18 hours a day. Maria could handle daily operations. He'd hired good people, built systems that worked without constant intervention. Maybe there was room for something more. I don't know, Ryan admitted. Ask me again tomorrow. But over the next week, the idea kept circulating in his mind. He did some research on logistics consulting, what it involved, how the market worked. Called Patricia Chen to ask about business partnership structures and liability concerns. Talked to Marcus, who'd left Midwest Transportation after Damien's firing and was now doing freelance operations analysis. Consulting's where the real money is, Marcus said. Companies will pay insane amounts to have someone come in and fix their broken systems. And you've got proof you can do it. Your facility's performance numbers are better than places with 10 times your budget. But I've only been doing this for 3 years. Who's going to hire someone with 3 years' experience? They're going to hire someone who took a dead property and turned it into one of the best performing facilities in the corridor. That's worth more than 20 years of pushing papers in a corporate office. Ryan met with Victoria 2 weeks later at a coffee shop halfway between their locations. She showed up in jeans and a sweater instead of the business suits he was used to seeing her in, and she looked simultaneously younger and more tired. Thanks for meeting, she said, ordering something complicated with too many modifiers. I know this is a lot to consider. Can I ask you something first? Why me? You could partner with anyone in the industry. Victoria stirred her coffee, considering her answer. Because you rebuilt yourself from nothing, and that's rare. Most people in this industry, including me, we climbed ladders someone else built. You constructed your own ladder from scrap metal while raising a kid alone. That kind of resourcefulness is valuable. Or it's just desperation. There's not as much difference as you think. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I put together some preliminary numbers. What we could charge, projected client base, revenue splits. It's rough, but it gives you an idea. Ryan opened the folder and immediately felt overwhelmed. Revenue projections in the 6 figures, client lists that included companies he recognized, service packages for facility optimization and operations auditing. This is way more formal than I expected. I've been planning it for months. You're the first person I've approached about partnership because I wanted to see if you were interested before developing it further. If you say no, I'll pursue it independently. But I think we'd be better together. Ryan looked at the numbers again. Even a fraction of the projected revenue would be more than he'd made in his best corporate year. Combined with the facility income, it would mean actual financial security, college fund for Tommy. Maybe a house instead of an apartment. The kind of stability he'd stopped believing was possible. What's the time commitment? Maybe 10 to 15 hours a week to start. We'd take clients slowly, build reputation, scale as demand grows. You'd still have time for your facility and Tommy. And if it doesn't work, if we can't get clients or the consulting market is saturated, Victoria smiled slightly. Then we tried something and learned from it. I'm not risking money I can't afford to lose, and neither would you be. This is a growth opportunity, not a survival gamble. Ryan thought about the last time someone offered him a professional opportunity that sounded too good to be true. Thought about Damien's exclusive partnership proposal with its hidden traps and poison clauses. But Victoria wasn't Damien. She'd proven that repeatedly over the past 6 months. I need to talk to Tommy about it, Ryan said. He's 8, but his life gets affected by my decisions. I need to make sure he understands what I'm considering. That's fair? Take whatever time you need. That evening, after homework and dinner and Murphy's walk, Ryan sat down with his son. Remember Victoria, the lady who helped Dad with the logistics facility? Tommy nodded. The one who sounds smart. Yeah, her. She wants to start a new business and she asked if I want to help her run it. It would mean more work for me, but also more money, which could mean better things for us. Like what things? Maybe a house, maybe better vacations. Definitely a more secure college fund. Tommy thought about this seriously. Would you be happy doing it? The question caught Ryan off guard. I don't know. Maybe. Then you should try it. You're always telling me to try new things even if they're scary. When did you get so wise? I'm 8 now. That's pretty old. Ryan pulled his son into a hug, feeling grateful for this weird little person who'd been through so much and somehow came out kind and thoughtful anyway. He called Victoria the next day. I'm in. Let's build something. They spent the next month setting up the consulting partnership, LLC, paperwork, insurance, website development, marketing materials. Victoria handled most of the administrative work while Ryan focused on developing their service methodology. They called it Cornerstone Logistics Consulting, and their pitch was simple: practical solutions from people who'd actually built and run successful operations. Their first client came through one of Victoria's corporate connections, a mid-sized manufacturing company whose distribution network was hemorrhaging money through inefficiency. Ryan and Victoria spent 3 days on site analyzing their workflows, identifying bottlenecks, proposing solutions. The company implemented 70% of their recommendations and saw immediate cost reductions. They paid the consulting fee without argument and referred 2 other companies. By month 3, Cornerstone had 6 active clients and a waiting list. Ryan was working 15 hours a week on consulting, and the revenue was exceeding their projections. He hired another supervisor for the facility to free up more of his time, promoted Maria to operations manager with a significant raise. Tommy adjusted to the new schedule better than Ryan expected. You're still home for dinner, his son observed. That's what matters. Summer brought the corridor's Phase 2 expansion. More freight volume, additional capacity requirements, new facility partnerships. Ryan's operation expanded to 250,000 square feet, and the revenue from both the facility and consulting meant Ryan was making more money than he'd imagined possible 3 years ago. He bought a house, nothing extravagant, a 3-bedroom in a decent school district with a yard for Murphy and a garage where Ryan could actually park instead of scraping ice off his windshield all winter. Tommy picked out his own room, painted it blue, declared it the best room in the entire world. We really live here? Tommy asked the first night, standing in the empty living room. We really do, bud. It's huge. It wasn't huge, maybe 1,800 square feet, but compared to their 1-bedroom apartment, it felt like a mansion. Victoria came by for the housewarming party Ryan threw in August. It was casual, just Jerome and Maria from the facility, a few of Tommy's friends and their parents, Marcus and his wife. Victoria showed up with an expensive bottle of wine and spent 20 minutes talking to Tommy about school and whether Murphy was a good dog. This is nice, she said later, standing in the backyard while kids ran around and adults talked. You've built a good life here. We've built a good business, Ryan corrected. The consulting's going way better than I expected. Because you're good at it. I keep telling you that. I keep not believing you, Victoria laughed. Work on that. Confidence looks good on you. Over the next few months, something shifted between them. Small things at first. Coffee meetings that ran long because they were enjoying the conversation. Text messages about non-work topics. The way Victoria always asked about Tommy and actually listened to the answers. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together so smoothly it sometimes felt like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. Ryan didn't notice he was developing feelings until Jerome pointed it out. You're into the CEO lady. Ryan looked up from the maintenance schedule he was reviewing. What? Victoria. You like her. It's obvious. We're business partners, that's it. Jerome gave him a look that suggested Ryan was an idiot. You check your phone every time she texts. You talk about her to Tommy. Last week you rescheduled a client meeting because she had a conflict. That's just being professional. That's you being interested and refusing to admit it.
Ryan tried to dismiss it, but once Jerome planted the idea, Ryan couldn't stop noticing things. The way Victoria smiled when they solved a particularly difficult logistics problem together. How she'd started staying for dinner occasionally after late meetings, sitting at Ryan's kitchen table like she belonged there. The fact that Tommy adored her and Murphy wagged his entire body whenever she arrived. He didn't know what to do with these observations. Victoria was his business partner, the person who'd given him a second chance when his career was destroyed. Starting anything romantic felt risky, potentially stupid, like he'd be gambling their professional relationship on personal feelings that might not be reciprocated. So he did nothing and hoped the feelings would fade. They didn't fade. In October, a major logistics conference happened in Detroit. Both Ryan and Victoria were scheduled to present on facility optimization strategies, showcasing the work they'd done with Cornerstone. It was their biggest professional exposure yet. 300 industry professionals, including executives from companies they'd been trying to land as clients. Ryan was terrified. "You've presented to boards before," Victoria said during the drive up. "This is the same thing. This is 300 people who probably know I got fired from my last corporate job. This is 300 people who are going to see what you've built despite that. Stop catastrophizing." The presentation went better than Ryan's anxiety predicted. They tag-teamed the content, Victoria handling the strategic overview, Ryan presenting the practical implementation case studies. The audience asked good questions. Several people approached them afterward about potential consulting contracts. That evening, there was a networking reception. Ryan hated these events. Too much small talk, too much pretending to care about people's opinions on market trends. But Victoria insisted they needed to make appearances, so they went. 2 hours in, Ryan was ready to fake a migraine and escape when someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around and came face to face with Damian Wolf. Ryan's entire body went rigid. He hadn't seen Damian since the facility visit months ago, hadn't thought about him much since the firing. Damian looked different, older somehow, or maybe just tired. His suit was still expensive, but he carried himself with less of that aggressive confidence. "Ryan," Damian said, "can we talk for a minute?" Every instinct told Ryan to say no and walk away. But Victoria was watching, and a scene at a professional conference would help no one. "Sure." They moved to a quieter corner. Damian held a drink he didn't seem interested in drinking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I saw your presentation," Damian finally said. "It was good. Really good." Ryan waited. "I wanted to apologize for everything that happened at Midwest, for the harassment afterward, for trying to sabotage your facility partnership. It was unprofessional, and it was wrong." Ryan studied Damian's face, looking for the trap, the angle. What brought this on? Getting fired, having time to think about why it happened. Damian set down his drink. "I've been in this industry for 20 years, Ryan. I built my reputation on being the smartest person in the room, and when you challenged my strategy, when you were right and I was wrong, I couldn't handle it. So I destroyed you instead of admitting I'd made a mistake." "Yeah, you did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I understand what I did, and I'm sorry." Ryan looked at the man who'd tried to end his career, who'd fabricated evidence and blacklisted him and made 2 years of his life brutal. Looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a distant acknowledgement that they were two people who'd hurt each other in different ways. "I appreciate you saying that," Ryan said finally. "I don't know if it changes anything, but I appreciate it." Damian nodded, seemed like he wanted to say something else, then just walked away. Victoria appeared at Ryan's elbow. "You okay?" "Yeah, that was weird, but okay." "He apologized?" "He did. I think he even meant it. Are you going to forgive him?" Ryan thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe eventually. Right now, I'm just glad he's not my problem anymore." They left the reception early, walked back to the hotel through Detroit's downtown. October air was cold enough to need jackets, but not brutal yet. Victoria walked close enough that their shoulders occasionally bumped. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said. "Sure. I'm glad you said yes to the partnership, not just because the business is working, but because I like working with you.
You make me better at this. Ryan's heart rate picked up. You make me better too, at all of it. Running the facility, the consulting, just being less afraid all the time. They stopped walking, stood on a sidewalk in downtown Detroit while other conference attendees passed by, and Victoria looked at him with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. I should probably tell you that this isn't just professional for me anymore, she said quietly. I know that's complicated given our business relationship, and if you don't feel the same way, we can pretend this conversation never happened. But I wanted to be honest. Ryan felt something unlock in his chest. It's not just professional for me either. Hasn't been for a while. Victoria smiled, actually smiled, and Ryan realized he'd been waiting months to see that particular expression directed at him. So what do we do about it? She asked. I have no idea. I'm terrible at this. I've been a single parent for so long I don't even remember how dating works. We could start with dinner, just the two of us, see how it feels. Okay, yeah, dinner. They had dinner that night at a quiet restaurant Victoria knew, talked for 3 hours about everything except work, and Ryan remembered what it felt like to connect with another adult who actually understood him. Not despite the struggles of the last 3 years, but because of them. Victoria had seen him at his most uncertain and had chosen to believe in him anyway. When he got back to his hotel room, Ryan called Tommy. How's the conference? His son asked, sounding sleepy. Good. Really good, actually. I need to tell you something. What? Victoria and I are going to start dating, like romantically. Is that okay with you? Tommy was quiet for a moment. Does this mean she'll be around more? Probably, yeah. Good. I like her. She's nice and she laughs at my jokes. Pause. Does this mean you're going to be happy all the time now? I don't know about all the time, but maybe more often, yeah. Okay, that's good. You deserve to be happy, Dad. Ryan's throat tightened. When did you get so grown up? I'm 8. I told you, that's pretty old. The relationship developed slowly, carefully. Victoria was patient with Ryan's hesitation about letting someone into his and Tommy's life. They had dinner dates, watched movies, spent Sundays at the park with Tommy and Murphy. She integrated into their routine without trying to change it, understood that Tommy came first and never made Ryan feel guilty about that. By December, she had a toothbrush at Ryan's house. By January, Tommy was asking when she was moving in. By March, Ryan had stopped being surprised when he woke up, and she was there, making breakfast while Murphy begged for scraps. The consulting business kept growing. They hired 2 junior consultants to handle the overflow, opened a small office near Ryan's facility. The facility itself was operating at full capacity, generating steady income with minimal drama. Ryan had built something sustainable, something that would provide for Tommy long term. One evening in late spring, almost exactly 4 years after Ryan had bought the abandoned property with his last savings, he stood at the loading dock watching trucks move through the facility. Victoria came up beside him, handed him coffee even though it was 7 p.m. and caffeine at this hour was a terrible idea. What are you thinking about? She asked. How different this is from what I imagined. When I bought this place, I just wanted to survive. Make enough money that Tommy and I wouldn't be homeless. I never thought it could become something like this. You built more than a facility. You built a life. Ryan thought about that. About Tommy in his own bedroom in a house they owned. About Murphy sleeping on the couch. About the consulting business that had grown from a conversation into an actual company. About Victoria standing next to him, part of his life in ways he'd stopped believing were possible. I used to think success meant climbing the corporate ladder, Ryan said. Getting promotions, impressing executives, collecting titles. Damien destroyed all of that, and I thought my life was over. But it wasn't. No, it was just beginning differently than I planned. He looked at her. If you'd asked me 4 years ago whether getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have called you insane. But now, I don't know. Maybe it was. Not because the firing was good, but because it forced me to build something real instead of just climbing someone else's ladder. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. You would have built something eventually. You're too stubborn not to. They stood there while the sun set over the facility, watching the corridor they'd both helped create function exactly as designed. Freight moving, systems working, people employed and making livings doing good work. Tommy called, asking when they were coming home for dinner. Murphy was apparently staging a protest because his food bowl had been empty for 20 whole minutes, and he was clearly starving to death. "We're heading home now," Ryan said. Then to Victoria. "Ready?" "Always." They drove back to the house together, and Ryan thought about futures nobody saw coming, about how the people society declares finished sometimes become the ones who build things that matter, about second chances and stubbornness, and the courage it takes to gamble everything on yourself when everyone else has given up. He'd been a man destroyed by someone else's insecurity and cruelty. He'd rebuilt himself into someone who created opportunities instead of climbing toward them. He'd found love he'd stopped looking for and built a family from people who chose to be there. Damien had tried to end him. Instead, he'd inadvertently freed Ryan to become something better than he'd ever been before. That wasn't forgiveness. Ryan still didn't know if he'd get there. But it was understanding, recognition, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us clear space for the best things we never imagined. Tommy met them at the door, Murphy bouncing around their feet, and the house smelled like whatever experimental dinner experiment Tommy and the babysitter had attempted. Victoria laughed at something Tommy said, and Ryan realized this was it. This was the future he'd been building toward without knowing it. Not perfect, not smooth, but real and his, and built from nothing but determination and the stubborn belief that being destroyed once didn't mean staying destroyed forever. The loading docks would open tomorrow morning. Trucks would arrive carrying freight for the Northeastern Corridor. The facility would operate exactly as designed, proof that abandoned things could be restored, and the people everyone writes off sometimes become the ones who build what matters. But tonight, Ryan was home with his son and his dog, and the woman who'd seen him at his lowest and chosen to believe he could be more. That was enough, more than enough, everything that mattered.